Of course I can hear you saying it. Yeah, no, Lewis, I know you're not kidding. I used to work with you most days of the week for 3 years. No, he's just gonna. I know. Pooch told me. Look, there's no point talking when Lewis is on. You should just let him talk. Well, obviously, I don't hate the English people, Mike. No, of course not. Oh, we have so much coming up today, Mike. Thanks very much for this brilliant handover. I mean, just as well I don't take Lewis Schaefer to heart, isn't it? I find it absolutely fantastic. Look, by the way, Lewis Schaefer is on the Littlewood and Cox show later, so please tune in for that. There will be more personal insults. He'll be pointing out how much belly fat I've gained since I last saw him. He'll be asking me very personal questions, probably health related. He's probably got access to my NHS records. But other than Lewis Schaefer, we've got some great guests on, which I'll make everybody aware of at the start of the next show, Mike. But it is fun packed. Obviously, Littlewood's with me. He's down the line. We'll find out why he's down the line again. But we have got a great show planned for absolutely everybody, Mike. Dogs. Pooch is pooch.
Simon Kilford, Paul Cox, Unlock Littlewood are two fantastic presenters. Unlock Littlewood?
Five, four, three, two, one. Good morning, common sensors. It's 10 a.m, which means only one thing. It's the Littlewood and Cox show. Now, don't be alarmed. At 10 a.m. in the studios where we are here in a top secret location, they do have a fire alarm test. It hasn't gone off yet. As you can see over there, it is 10 o'clock. So maybe there is an actual fire and they're not going to set the alarm off. But if you hear that, please don't grasp your phones and head for the bunker. You don't have to do your shoelaces up or not do a barbecue today. It's just a test here. Welcome to Littlewood and Cox. Have we got a show for you today? As you just saw, we've got the mighty Lewis Schaefer in later in the show, who's just going to spend probably 10 or 15 minutes attacking me personally. So if you like that sort of thing, please stay tuned. Lewis is mental, but that's exactly why we love him. We've got Andrew Allison coming on the show very shortly. He'll be our first guest. We've got a first timer. We've got Matthew Hurt, who is a Republican US political commentator. Matthew is here all the way from the US of A. And then we have our favourite / least favourite lefty, which is Matthew Holbrook, coming to talk to us about the big question of the day. Why on earth would anyone vote for a left-wing party? We all know the answer. He's going to try and convince us otherwise. Then we're going to laugh at him and move on. So stay tuned for that. We've also got all the things that are going to cut in front of the papers. Look at this. Look at this. So who was the White House hoaxer who duped the PM? Anyone can dupe our PM. He's an absolute twonk, as we know. The show, by the way, behind the scenes, Pooch is still here. Of course, Pooch is still here. He lives here. He lives just over there. And we've got Scarlett and we've got a Duke, the Duke, which is Luke. We're just Luke the Duke. They're our team today. But where is my man? Where is my partner in crime? Mr. Mark Littlewood, where are you, sir?
Coxie, how the devil are you? As you can see, I'm still in hiding in the bunker. Am I coming across loud and clear? I know from my end, we were dealing with the technical issues yesterday. Can you hear me?
All good here. I mean, absolutely. In the comments, no problems. Hando with Mike smooth. Everything's working like a slippery eel going down a water slide.
Scarlett, Luke, the whole team. That's absolutely brilliant. Paul, I've decided, I mean, the fact that the technicals have gone so smoothly so far today, I am claiming credit for. Now, that's why I'm not in London, Cox. That's why I'm not in London. Yet more emergency alerts. But once we did a debrief yesterday, Paul, you quite rightly pointed out that the shirts I were wearing were so loud, they were bound to interfere with the sound. They were bound to interfere with the audio. So I've gone back to my understated self, just straight navy blue. But I'm not really inclined, you've just mentioned it, Coxie, I'm not really inclined to leave the bunker because some prankster pretending to be President Trump's chief of staff can get straight through to our Prime Minister. I mean, the British government's hanging by a thread. What sort of orders might he receive? And, you know, I think he's easily persuadable, young Andy. So some prankster can phone up the Prime Minister. God only knows which buttons he's being told to press. So I reckon just for now, Coxie, if you don't mind, I feel a little bit safer, a little bit less nervous here in my bunker in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, look, I mean, once again, I've ignored all risk mitigation and just come into the studio anyway. There's alarms going off, as you heard. I'm glad I mentioned that at the top, so no one panicked after last Friday's. But you're absolutely right. What an utterly ridiculous story on the front of the Mail. So who was the White House hoaxer who duped the PM? I mean, it's already mental that we have a Prime Minister called Andy and a Defence Secretary called Wes. Wes and Andy were the local scallies on my council estate when I was growing up. They were never meant to be Prime Minister and Defence Secretary. But Mark, what do you make of this story? The fact that you can actually just contact the Prime Minister directly and pretend to be someone influential in the White House of all places.
Yeah, look, I'm pretty bamboozled about it. Just before we came on air, Paul, though, we were talking, weren't we, that presumably, you know, vast numbers of people do actually have the Prime Minister's telephone number, right? There's lots of people who legitimately want to call him. And I guess once many hundreds of people have got your telephone number, it's easy for it to leak. But I don't know about you, Cox. I mean, you and I now being, you know, world famous celebrities, thanks to Mike Graham and the UK Live Online team, I basically don't accept a call unless I know the number it's coming from. So, you know, when you're phoning me at 3 o'clock in the morning in floods of tears because you just sort of can't cope with how terrible Portsmouth Football Club are, at least my phone flashes up, it's Paul Cox calling, right? It's Paul Cox. I know it's you. I mean, obviously, I'll never take the call, but at least I know who's trying to get me. So presumably Andy Burnham answered a call with his phone saying, this is probably from a telemarketer or something. And he still thought, oh, well, I'll see what they've got to offer. I would have thought the Prime Minister should only answer a call if it's absolutely plain he knows who's calling and the name flashes up, right? So Andy made a bit of a slip here, a serious breach of security protocol, not just in somebody getting hold of his number. I guess that's not too difficult. But in Burnham accepting the call and then apparently believing it was actually Trump's chief of staff.
Look, I mean, it is absolutely bonkers. Perhaps we'll cover it a bit later. I just want to dive into the comments, actually, because we are nothing nothing without our viewers and listeners. So thanks ever so much, all of you, across the two channels, Mike Graham and UK Live Online. Thank you ever so much. In the Mike Graham chat at the moment, somebody's been wished happy birthday. I still can't figure out who it is. Can somebody shout in the comments
John
who's
Evans,
being wished
Big
happy
John
birthday?
Evans.
John Evans.
Big
John Evans is being wished happy birthday. Thank you very much, Luke the Duke back there. Happy birthday, John. Anything else is going to catch my interest in there? There seems to be, I mean, there's a lot of love for Lewis Schaefer. Obviously, you've never met him, so I can appreciate that your ignorance with regard to Lewis would lead you to love him. Some people favouring Lewis over me. One person saying they couldn't really stand me. I mean, are you joking? Everybody loves me.
Harsh.
Well, most people love me. I love me. I really love me. I say this in the mirror every morning. I stand there and go, oh my God, what a lovely guy.
Paul, Simon Kilford's asked in the chat, Mark Littlewood and Paul Cox, when did we first meet? I'm trying to remember which prison it was. Do you recall?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
It was, I think it wasn't Broadmoor because we weren't there at the same time.
No, that's right. Yeah.
It might have been
Belmarsh? Belmarsh?
Yes, Belmarsh. Yes, yes, yes. I remember. I saw you gouging the eyes out of someone who didn't support Southampton, and I thought, you know what? This is the guy for me to keep away from. But we became friends nonetheless. We actually met doing right-wing media, which is obviously the best kind of. It's not right-wing media, is it? We just met doing media that isn't absolute niff-naff and trivia, telling you you've got to be scared of the sun. Or that Jason Arday was telling the truth. We'll touch on Jason Arday a bit later, but Mark, the vigil last night, you're aware of it, yes?
Yeah. I assume you didn't go on it, Coxie, right?
Well, Charlotte, our executive producer here, slash booker, slash absolutely everything, the UK Live Online mum, as I like to call her, the one who looks after us all impeccably well, I should say. Saw my social media post and said, were you there? And I said, no, I wasn't there. That was a screenshot of somebody else's video. And she said, that's the sort of thing someone who went there and didn't want people to know they were there would say, and then sent me an AI image of me kneeling for Black Lives Matter.
Taking the knee.
That's all fake news. All very fake
there
news,
you go.
Mark.
Well, as you said, Coxie, I think we've only met on pure truth news. We spread a little bit of optimism. We drop a few truth bombs. Look, it's a tragedy what's happened. We covered it a lot on yesterday's show, Cox. Nobody would have wished this on the man. Absolutely horrific. This farcical, almost comical story turned very, very dark. It's horrible. It's ghastly. But what I hate is the people organising the vigil last night. We are, as you know, Paul, an English-only language channel, but we also try to use the English language correctly. And what I'm not getting here at all, and I mean, I'm making a slightly pedantic point, but what I'm not getting at all is the idea that poor Jason Arday was subject to a witch hunt. The Wayman Bennett, who was the organiser of yesterday's vigil, which was put together by Stand Up to Racism, he said that the Arday's death was down to a right-wing media witch hunt. And we're going to hear this witch hunt word one hell of a lot as we pick through the Arday tragedy. And Coxie, I won't have it. Because, look, even if you think, I mean, I think you'd have to be mad to think this, but even if you think that these journalists should not have asked questions about Arday's career and his supposed achievements, even if you think that's impertinent in some way for somebody from the Telegraph or the Times Higher Education Supplement to actually say, look, I've looked into this and it's evident that you didn't do it or you didn't achieve it, even if you think that shouldn't happen, it's not a witch hunt. The whole point of the concept of a witch hunt is you're chasing somebody for fabricated reasons. There aren't any witches. Well, tell us in the chat if you think they are, but I think us common sensors know there are no witches. So when you're chasing somebody on the grounds of being a witch, the reason this term is used is you're chasing them on confected, fabricated, made-up grounds. They've done nothing wrong. They haven't lied. They haven't cheated. They haven't done anything fraudulent. You're just accusing them of being a witch when witchcraft doesn't exist. Well, that wasn't what happened in the Arday case, that he was being asked actual questions about actual facts. So whatever you happen to think, and I happen to think that this entire crisis is down to principally Cambridge University and then the wokerati who are willfully blind to our day's shortcomings. But whatever you think about it, journalists asking legitimate questions about facts to establish the truth can never be a witch hunt. They can sometimes be impertinent, they can sometimes be pushy. But if you're asking about the truth, that's not only okay, it's the job of the goddamn media.
Absolutely, Mark. Well put. And we will cover more of this after our first guest, which is coming shortly. I know he's here. The one thing I will ask of people in the comments is do let me know, because Lewis is coming up later. I want you just to write either Paul or Lewis. Who do you prefer? Who's the most handsome? Who's the best? Who would you rather spend 10 minutes with? Paul or Lewis in the comments. And when I speak to Lewis later, we'll discuss that very poll. Paul or Lewis, who do you like? Bearing in mind that I am amazing. But we do have our first guest, Andrew Allison. Take it from there, Mark. Thank you very much, mate.
Yeah, back to you soon. Andrew, good to see you. Welcome.
Good to see you too.
This is your debut appearance on this show, I think, my friend, isn't it? So
it is. Yes. I've interviewed you a few times, but now you're getting your own back on me, I think.
Yeah, and this is going to be brutal, Andrew, right? I've got a whole series of incredibly difficult questions for you. So, just so the audience know, Andrew and I do work together. Full disclosure here. This is not going to be like Ed Balls interviewing Yvette Cooper when they pretend they don't know each other on breakfast television. Andrew and I work hand in glove and my outfit Popcorn. Andrew is our brilliant head of campaigns, makes sure everything works, gets our message out to the grassroots, is on the airwaves extraordinarily frequently. And a few months ago, decided to go over from the Conservative Party to Reform. I should say Popcorn, even though it's called Popular Conservatism, we're ecumenical. As long as you basically agree with our ideas, we don't care what rosette you wear. But Andrew, I wanted to pick your brains because you are one of the acutest observers of this. Of where do we think the different right-wing parties or centre-right parties are now? And in particular, what did you make of Reform rolling out their welfare policy yesterday? Robert Jenrick thinks through a range of measures that he can save £50 billion from the welfare bill. Jenrick made a major error. He made that announcement while Cox and I were live on air, so very few people saw it at the time, but a day later we can reflect upon it. Talk us through what Reform's proposals are here and what are we to make of them? Brilliant, good, adequate, falling short?
To answer your first question there, Mark, where are centre-right parties at the moment? I wrote a piece for Conservative Home last week, and I said that we all really need to be a lot more civil towards each other and start cooperating with each other. Because I think what the parties are trying to do is pretend that there are massive differences in policies when there are not. But we've had almost a circular firing squad at the moment. We had this last week when Zia Youssef called Ben Wallace, former Conservative Defence Secretary, a traitor. He then went on to call him a moron. Ben Wallace defended himself, as you would expect, but then I had to throw in an ad hominem attack on Suella Braverman, who then came back at him. And then, of course, you've got Restore, who are calling anyone who disagrees with them traitors to the white race, or words to that effect. And when you look at the polls, and then when you also look at polling data, go back to 1979, you realise that more people vote for parties on the left than they do for parties on the right. And that even happened during Margaret Thatcher's time. So I think a little bit more cooperation is what we need there. Regarding Reform's announcement yesterday, I was rather cheered by it, I have to say, because at last we've got a political party, and the Conservatives are doing this as well, who are telling us how they're going to cut spending, Mark. I mean, normally it's how much money they're going to spend, and they're trying to outbid each other on that. But here we have a party saying, we're going to cut spending, and by God, do we need to cut public spending? Probably by about £150 billion a year to balance the books and start repaying off this £3 trillion worth of debt. I agree with the sort of welfare to work scheme. If people are claiming state benefits, say for more than 6 months a year, then they should go out and do something in the community. And I think that's important. And there was also a case, I can't remember which US state it is, Mark, but you've highlighted it before, where a city did that, and here presto,
Wisconsin. It was Wisconsin. Yeah, Wisconsin. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, here presto, everybody then went and got out and got a job because they didn't want to do that sort of work. So
Yeah,
so these things do work. What I am concerned about is denying benefits to people who are EU citizens with settled status. One, I'm concerned because there will be many people who've been here for 15, 20 years that have paid their tax, that have paid their national insurance. And if they happen to fall on harder times, then surely they should be allowed to claim benefits because they have paid into the system. But my main worry here is that this is going to open up a new negotiation with the European Union. And I don't really think reform wants to open that
yeah.
particular can of worms, because if reform is fortunate enough to be elected into government, it's going to have enough on its hands trying to battle the blob, the establishment here in the UK, without taking on the EU at the same time. I think that's going to
Yeah.
take up too much bandwidth.
Andrew, bear with us. Let's just listen to a short clip of what Robert Jenrick said. And I think you're right. I don't know whether he's learnt directly from an experiment, a successful experiment that I often referenced by Governor Scott Walker in Wisconsin back in the 90s. The idea was workfare rather than welfare. So if you're claiming welfare, are able-bodied of working age, you're expected to go and help in the community rather than sit on your backside. But let's play clip number 3. This was Robert Jenrick outrageously clashing with the Cox and Littlewood show. Very rookie media error by the Reform Treasury spokesman. But nevertheless, this is what he had to say. That's clip number 3, if we got it too.
The British taxpayer is acting as the welfare state for the world. That's unfair. We all know it. There are 6.6 million working-age people in the UK claiming out-of-work benefits. Among their number are many who can work, who should work, but have chosen not to. In towns and cities up and down the country, working people tell stories of those in their communities who are pulling a fast one, taking everyone for fools. The family who enjoy regular holidays, nights out, who have new Motability cars on the drive, but who, out of choice, haven't seen a day's work for years, sometimes decades. That is fundamentally unfair. What was a source of pride for British people, a marker that we all live in a civilized society, has become viewed by many people as a joke. And in the cold light of day, has to be seen, I believe, as both a moral and an economic catastrophe. A broken contract, which too often takes from those who choose to work and hands to those who choose not to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically with his sentiments, Andrew, and I'm intrigued by your sort of strategic view that even though we might want to remove benefits from certain EU citizens, if it's going to take 3 years to renegotiate a treaty, that's not ideal. But I guess the point I want to put to you as a reformer is, do you think this goes far enough? On yesterday's show, Mark's metric of madness was 122 billion. That's how big the welfare bill has exploded in real terms since 2000. Well, great. I'm delighted we're talking about tens of billions of pounds of savings here at last. I'm with you, Andrew. I applaud that. But that takes us less than halfway back to, what you might consider was a slightly more sensible bill. Is this just the sort of first volley fired by Jenrick, or is this the end of the matter? Because I would have wanted him to be even bolder, I think.
I would too, Mark, and I hope that it is the first volley. And of course, we need to reduce public spending overall. You came up with some interesting statistics a week or two ago, didn't you? That it took 316 years to accumulate £1 billion worth of £1 trillion worth of debt, rather, and then 10 years to accumulate the second, and 5 years to accumulate the third trillion. And the rate we're going at the moment, it'll take just under 8 years to get up to 4 trillion. That's if the country doesn't go bankrupt and we have to go to the IMF. So there are massive savings to be made. And there are massive savings to be made in this welfare budget. Yes, I hope this is the first volley, the first tranche of cuts that Robert Jenrick is proposing. But we do need to go further, and we need to go much further in other budgets as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I hope it is only a start. And I think that the reason you mentioned it, Andrew, as well, I think the reason that people like Andrew and myself mention the sort of £150 billion number, which is rough and ready, but that's about the budget deficit in roundabout terms. So if you're not making 150 billion of savings there or thereabouts, it depends exactly how much tax you get in, how good economic growth is, and a whole range of other things. But that ballpark number, you're not even going to balance the books, let alone start to pay down the national debt. We've put the link in the chat. Read Andrew's article on Conservative Home. Really interesting idea that, wherever you stand, whichever rosette you wear, should we try and at least show some civility to each other? We might need each other in future, who knows? Andrew, I want to move on to Kemi Badenoch and the risk of becoming a party election broadcast for the Tories. I do want to show her latest advert that she put up on social media, the Conservatives put up on social media. I think it's quite interesting. I think she makes a good abstract point, no specific policy, unlike generic, actual policy. But feast your eyes on this, and then I'll come back to you, Andrew, and see what your thoughts are. That's clip number 4, Kemi Badenoch against the state.
Do you feel like everything is getting more expensive? That's because it is. Well, nearly everything. Many luxuries have got cheaper, but necessities have got more expensive. You used to pay at least £10 for an album. Now you pay £10 a month for almost every song and piece of music ever written. Or take TVs. Most Brits pay less than £500 for a TV now. For that, they can get a wafer-thin, Ultra HD 50-inch plus TV with full internet connectivity. 30 years ago, we would pay triple that for a box that is double the weight, but with the screen half the size. What do TVs and music have in common? The government doesn't interfere. Now, let's look at necessities. Food, energy, housing. For decades, governments have piled on the pressure in these industries. We block housing from being built, we ban drilling for oil and gas, we hike taxes on pubs and restaurants. It's where government isn't imposing burdens that things are getting cheaper. So I say enough. And that's why I'm saying to Labour, stop with the endless tax rises. It's making everything worse and everything more expensive. And there's still no extra money for public services. And Andy Burnham needs to stop saying he's cutting VAT on energy bills when actually he's cutting about 10p a day and just for 6 months. This is a cheap trick. Conservatives can and are doing better. Take a look at our cheap power plan. We've got a plan to bring down the cost of everything. Housing, energy, food, even getting to work and doing your job. We are the only party with an actual plan to get Britain working again.
Well, she spoke to my kind of libertarian soul a bit there, Andrew, although I do see Anna saying in the chat, so she's selling TVs now, is she? Maybe Kemi's selling TVs. But basically, the right approach from Kemi. No, I mean, right, she references a cheap power plan thing, but again, the narrative, and I know loads of people won't trust the Conservatives because they said all this time after time, and taxes went up and regulation went up and spending went up and lockdowns happened and freedom was diminished. But were you to take her at her word, were you to give the Conservatives another hearing, then she's speaking the right language, isn't she? And I can't really find a cigarette paper between her saying that, and I reckon Nigel Farage would have said something almost identical on the same topic. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that is correct. And that was what I was trying to get across essentially in that Conservative Home piece, Mark, that there is very little that really divides us on the fundamentals. We really should be looking at who our true opponents are, and that's Labour, the Lib Dems, the Greens. So yes, I agree with you on that. And of course, she is correct on energy. The net zero policies are pushing up our energy bills. The labyrinthine planning rules and regulations in this country make it difficult to build new properties, or the new properties that we desperately need. And of course, that pushes up housing costs as well. The bit she referenced on food made it look as if all of us actually go out to pubs and restaurants to eat every day of the week. I think if we did that, none of us could afford to eat.
Yeah.
But I do take a point. Of course, it is very expensive to eat out now. The costs of employing people are high through employers' national insurance, through minimum wage, and of course through massive increases in business rates. So she makes a very good point there, and it's one of those videos that she can keep putting out every week or so, and we learn a little bit more about her. Her principles are essentially free market conservative, and I think that's what she's trying to present. These are my principles. This is what I stand for. All the details can come later and closer to a general election, but at least I'm happy with her principles.
But it's interesting seeing in the chat, I see Stevie Jenkins, we might want to put that one up again. She just isn't believable. I'll never vote Tory again. Alistair, Alistair Mon 2156 says, tell that to the Tory backbenchers. They're more like the Liberal Democrats. So there's an awful lot of people who say, yeah, great, you can fire a 2-minute advert at me saying you're going to cut tax and, let the market breathe and build business. But I probably voted for you several times over those 14 years, and you did the opposite. I know you're now a reformer, but how do you think the Tories should tackle that? I mean, is Kemi Bay not just sort of thinking, oh, well, with the passage of time, they'll forgive the Conservative Party? I don't think that will cut it. I mean, just look at what people are saying in the chat, right? That, they've just given up on the Conservatives. Fool me once, that's on me. Fool me twice or more. Fool me once, that's on you. Fool me twice or more, that's on me. I think a lot of the electorate feel that way. And I don't think the Conservatives have come up with any kind of explanation or way to win that tranche back. That's why so many people have gone to reform, I guess.
It's a very difficult question to answer for the Conservatives, Mark. I mean, we know in 2024, it's just over 2 years ago, they received one hell of a shellacking. The Conservative Party effectively trashed its own brand for those of a certain age, that they had their Ratner moment or Gerald Ratner moments, completely trashing the Conservative brand. I think all Kemi can do is to say that she is different and she will approach this differently. Whether people believe her or not, of course, is another question altogether. But I do believe her. I do believe that she is a free market conservative. But one of the people in the comments said, well, what about all the other Conservative MPs around her, the Lib Dems he referred to? And that is my problem as well. There are too many people in the Parliamentary Conservative Party who I do not regard as free market conservatives. Their voting record proves it. What they say in the media proves it. And that is the problem. And we know from when Labour tried to reduce welfare spending last year, and these were just small changes, really. The Labour backbenchers would not let Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves do it. And I think there is a warning, a reminder that in the parliamentary democracy, you have to have your MPs on side. And of course, if Kemi Badenoch were to become Prime Minister, I think it's unlikely, because I don't think the brand will be resuscitated enough before the next general election. But if that were to happen, and she were to have a small majority in the House of Commons, she can only get legislation through and policies through if her backbench MPs allow her to do so.
Yeah.
So we've seen with the Labour Party, even with a massive majority, like Keir Starmer won in 2024, even though the changes to welfare were not particularly large, his backbenchers still wouldn't allow him to do it.
Yeah. No, that's quite right. Now, a bit of breaking news that's just hit my inbox, Andrew, so I'll ask your thoughts about this. We sometimes talk about whether there's any way that the Conservatives and Reform could work together, or whether it would backfire, because so many Reform voters, a good number of them, I think, in the chat here today, distrust and despise the Conservatives so much they would find that a turn-off. They want to vote for Reform because it's something new, not because it's an adjunct to the Conservative Party who failed in government so badly. But you've been, and basically our outfit, Popcorn, tries to at least encourage discussions across the centre-right. Let's see if we can get to a common agenda. But let me pick about Reform a bit, because the breaking news is Tim Montgomery has just been suspended from Reform UK. This is breaking on the Guido Fawkes website. He's very outspoken, Tim. I think he's been somewhat critical of Zia Youssef recently. Apparently, he was told that he was suspended just before doing an interview with The Spectator. Andrew, in your new party, Reform, is there as much of a problem of them all taking lumps out of each other rather than taking lumps out of the Conservative Party or the Labour Party? I kind of want the people on the sensible side of the spectrum to aim their fire at the government and Andy Burnham, not to engage in circular firing squads. Now, we don't know exactly the reasons behind Tim's suspension. This is breaking news, but what's your take on that? Is there still a lot of internal fighting and bickering in Reform UK, Andrew?
Well, Tim's comments last week were directed at Zia Youssef, and I've already referenced this when Zia Youssef called Ben Wallace a traitor and a moron, and he called for more temperate language. And Nigel Farage seemed to agree with Tim Montgomery on this, because he said, I can't remember his exact words that Nigel used, but that it wouldn't be language that he would use, and he doesn't think it's appropriate language, something along those lines. So I thought that particular episode was over, and I did watch Tim's interview with The Spectator. I watched it late on last night, and yes, he gave a few home truths to Reform, but it was out of loyalty to Reform. He was trying to say we need to make these changes so we're ready to enter government. So that has actually surprised me. And I mean, I had a conversation on the phone with Tim just last week, and he was telling me how very much he is loyal to Reform. He was still very much intends to remain in the party. So I'm hoping that the suspension is rather short-lived. I think Tim is a definite asset to Reform UK.
Yeah, it's a tricky one for Reform. I mean, on the one hand, you don't want chaos, so you need to encourage loyalty. On the other hand, you can use sometimes a bit too much of a firm stick to enforce that, right? Eventually, a party that's big enough to form a government needs to be comfortable enough that it can accommodate factions within it, I would say.
Well, it does, but you know, Nigel Farage knew who Tim was when he accepted him as a member of the party. I mean, Tim said in his interview last night with Tim Shipman and James Heal of the Spectator that he said to Nigel when he was handing over his money, he said, "Are you sure about this?" He said, "Because I was an absolute pain in the arse to David Cameron, and I'll probably be a pain in the arse to you too." But
Right.
Nigel was welcoming of that, because we need people, or he needs people, Nigel needs people who are willing just to say what they think and stand up to him a little bit, rather than just having yes men around him. So hopefully it's
Yeah.
a short-lived suspension. I hope this is a bit of a storm in the teacup.
Great, Andrew. Great to hear from you. I hope I grilled you about the right temperature. Somebody said, "Why is a popcorn person interviewing a popcorn person?" But I think those are a few overarms, especially lobbing the breaking news at you. But Andrew, great to hear from you.
Well, that made the steak a little bit sort of medium. I mean, normally I have mine rare, but you know, it was
Yeah.
it was a little bit too well cooked for me.
Yeah. Bit of sizzle in that one. Andrew, great to hear from you. We'll speak again very, very soon. And do check out Andrew's thoughts on the Conservative Home website on how the right need to start speaking to each other. Thanks so much, Andrew. Let's bring Coxie back in, because we've got, speaking of Nigel Farage, we've got, Paul, the results of a poll. Now, I do need to confess, it's not exactly as big or as grand as the Clacton by-election. But Paul, have you seen the results, or do I need to act as the returning officer?
No, you can do that. Please do.
So the question on whether you prefer Paul Cox or Lewis Schaefer, Paul, I've got good news for you. No, there was another one. Who's your favourite? Love them both equally. There was definitely one before that.
Yeah, there was one. There was one before that. I was clearly winning. Lewis is actually still in
the
studio.
previous one that I wanted to. There you go.
Look at that.
53-47. But that was only it wasn't close. That was after 53 votes. When the poll closed, Coxie, you were on 63% of the vote. 63, which is exactly the vote share that Nigel Farage got in Clacton. You are the Nigel Farage of the UK Live Online Mike Graham Show
Brilliant.
audience, Coxie. Congratulations. How does that make you feel?
It is Paul Farage, Nigel Cox, whatever you want to call me, I don't mind. Look, Mark, we've got some super chats. We've got a really big one as well. Let's put that up on the screen and let's make sure we congratulate them. Look at that.
Wow.
€100, which I believe is 74 pence. Morning, Mike, Pooch, Charlotte, Alina, Scarlett, Luke, he's a Duke, by the way, and Lewis, spelled incorrectly, which I love. Please like and subscribe to the best show on the planet, which is, it didn't say which planet, but I'm assuming Earth, which is fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Mick Rose, 845. I don't know how many Mick Roses there are out there, but you've had to
At
say
least
you're
845.
Yeah, look, that was a very interesting interview with Andrew Allison there. It really sparked not so much a debate in the chat, but it poked at the wasp's nest, which is the huge cohort of people that used to be Conservative voters in the UK who now feel like there's no home for them within the Conservative Party, and have moved over to Reform largely elsewhere as well. But as a result, they are just not ever going to consider going back at this point. No matter how many red lines Kemi Badenoch draws, they are simply not going to go back, Mark.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And, you know, if our chat was an indication, and I do actually think the UK Live Online and Mike Graham audience are a pretty good reflection of opinion out there in our glorious country, then, yeah, the Conservatives have an absolutely monumental problem. And I don't think they know how to fix it other than with warm words. Where I really do agree with Andrew, and it's well worth checking out his Conservative Home article, I think even if you're like, I'll never vote Conservative again, or I don't much trust Farage enough yet, or I'm a bit worried Reform aren't up to government, or I think Restore are a bit too right-wing, whatever your views might be, I do think it's important that we try to retain civility amongst people who have broadly similar-ish views. That doesn't mean that we'll ever work together. It might be a fight to the death on the right of politics, but anything that makes it harder to work together if those parties need each other in some way in future, if there's a hung parliament for sake of argument, that strikes me as probably counterproductive. And it also takes away from, as I say, firing our shots at the Labour government, which is already under Andy Burnham, making a whole host of errors and missteps and mistakes.
Yes.
And you've got to be spending all of your time pointing those out and holding him into account.
Earlier on, when I asked which planet, Mark, Lou D63, thanks for coming back, Lou. You're always in the chat. Thank you so much. She said the common sense planet, Coxie. Of course, it's the common sense planet. There it is, up on the screen now. Look, before we go to our next guest, let's just touch back on Jason Arday again, shall we? Could we pull up image number 8, please? This was my tweet from yesterday. Now, obviously, this is an incredibly sensitive subject. A man has taken his own life, and no one wants to see that. My comment here was essentially on what took place yesterday. And I wrote, the Jason Arday vigil. Imagine turning up in your thousands 3 days after the man actually needed your help just to say, look at me, I feel bad, or look how virtuous I am. If narcissism produced energy, we'd reach net zero by midnight. Now, obviously strong words for me, and it's not a reflection on Jason Arday's death. Someone actually retweeted that saying, I hate this fat racist, to which I responded immediately saying, never call me fat, okay? Everything else is absolutely fine.
Yeah, that's the bit you're sensitive on, Coxie. Look, I agree with you. There's quite a theory of this. You know, the term virtue signalling, which is actually, you know, bandied around a lot. You're virtue signalling. It's a really interesting term, and obviously it means, you know, people saying things that they think go down well with the cognoscenti. Oh God, blimey! I've just broken the English language law, haven't I? Probably deserve a yellow card for saying cognoscenti. That is saying things that you think will go down well with your friends, your cohort. So especially if you're in a kind of lefty liberal woke kind of cohort, you go out of your way to say, you know, isn't the Daily Mail terrible? I can't believe what they're saying, typical Daily Mail, or isn't it appalling that X or Y have happened? And you're saying it not really to add to the conversation, but just to signal to the people that you're speaking to that you have virtue. And there's an economic rationale behind this, especially, a lot of people, I think, scratch their heads and say, why is it that it seems to be the affluent, the wealthy, people who are probably paying higher rates of tax and living in big houses who are now all voting for the left? I mean, look at London, and especially the richer parts of London. Crazy how they're all voting to the left. And it's mirrored in America as well. You will find, New York City and San Francisco and Los Angeles unbelievably left-wing. And my theory is, Cox, that when you get to a certain level of income or wealth, everything's more or less sorted, you've got all your pensions sorted out, you live in a lovely house, you've got 2 cars, you can afford expensive foreign holidays, you stop worrying about money so much. And you start worrying about how you're perceived by your peers and in society. So you're not that bothered if your taxes go up over 1 or 2%. What you want to happen to you is for you to be thought of as a good person. And therefore you go along with whatever nonsense means you will be seen as a good person. That becomes more valuable to you than money itself. Whereas if you move down the income spectrum, if you're on a much tighter margin, your taxes being high, for example, that means you can't go on a holiday at all. So this is why I think the people who tend to vote to the right and tend to vote to the left have flipped. It's actually people who've got more than enough money are now tempted to vote woke left because they care about their social status more than cash. And those who are just getting by, perhaps struggling or comfortable but not absolutely wealthy, well, they tend to vote right because they want to sort their own lives and put them in order and to do a bit of straight talking rather than positioning themselves in the appropriate way around an Islington dinner table. What do you think, Cox? Do you like my theory?
Yeah, excellent points there, and an excellent segue into actually the rest of the show. Later on in Cox's box, I'll be talking about socialism versus capitalism. I'll be talking about left versus right and what that means for the electorate. I'll also be talking about American politics after the news with an actual American, like a free-thinking one as well, not a Lewis Schaefer. But we're going to go to the news now, and we're back shortly with that interview.
Hello, I'm Edward Hughes. Here's a quick roundup of today's main UK headlines. Prime Minister Andy Burnham briefly exchanged messages with someone impersonating White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles before realising it was a fake and reporting it. Thousands gathered in Trafalgar Square for a vigil for former Cambridge professor Jason Arday, who died last week after resigning amid plagiarism claims he denied. His family said the public cruelty had been too much to bear. After weeks of extreme heat and drought, heavy rain and thunderstorms are sweeping in, bringing cooler temperatures and a risk of flash flooding on the hard, dry ground. UK house prices also saw their biggest August fall since 2018. That's the latest. Later, Tigers.
Well, thank you very much for the news there. It still is pretty disastrous out there, isn't it? But don't worry, we've got plenty to come in this show. Next, we're going to be talking to Matthew Hertz, who's with me now. Good morning, Matthew. How you doing, mate?
Hey, how's it going, Paul? It's great to be in the studio.
I'm so excited because you and I have only ever conversed across the Atlantic via technology on GB News, late at night for me, but in the evening for you. Matthew, tell us who you are, because there'll be people in our little sphere that don't know you.
Sure. Well, I grew up in American politics during the Tea Party, so the conservative movement that born out of the Obama administration. Grew up outside Nashville, and then after I attended college, I said, how do I get more involved? Came to work at a place right outside Washington, D.C. called the Leadership Institute, which trains conservatives in the United States to win elections. Got involved with them, and 17 years on, I'm back at Leadership Institute. I took a detour through the campaign world. Fundraising, and now I help conservatives get jobs. So in Washington, D.C., across the country in the United States, and even sometimes here in Great Britain and around the world. Got involved in politics. My parents were not political. I consider myself a small L libertarian, and obviously have been very involved in Republican politics in the States, and then occasionally provide commentary here in Great Britain and around the world.
That's absolutely fascinating. Now, when something perked my interest, then you said you help conservatives get jobs. Does that mean that it's difficult for conservatives to get jobs, or are you just getting people jobs that are conservative within conservative circles?
So it is sometimes difficult for conservatives to get jobs, but I help primarily with jobs in the presidential administration, like the Trump administration now, or in Congress, in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, or in the conservative nonprofit space, so places like the Heritage Foundation or America First Policy Institute. in the United States. But for the most part, I teach them, how to beef up their resume, how to be not idiots, not goobers, as I like to call them, and then just be as successful as they can in the public policy space. Everybody who's working on these issues, be it activists out in the field or professionals, we are better off when we are well trained and we know how to win, and that's winning elections and it's winning at the workplace.
Yeah, fantastic. So I can take it from all of this chat that you are a Donald Trump fan?
I like President Trump. I think that he's got a lot of really great ideas. He's been doing a lot of really good things. There are a couple of policy issues I disagree with him on. And I usually get asked to come, talk about those in places like this.
Yeah, which is interesting because whenever we have a discussion, it's often about the things perhaps that Trump's not quite doing right from a Republican conservative perspective. And one of those things is the Iran war. You've never really been supportive, is that fair to say, of the Iran war?
That would be very fair to say. The night before we began striking Iran, I was on GB News, and the host said, "What do you think about this?" And I said, "I think it's a bad idea," and I've been fairly consistent in that over the last several months.
Do you think it's still a bad idea? Yeah,
I still think it's a bad idea, and I'll say this, and Paul, you and I agree that the people of Iran deserve freedom. They deserve opportunity. I think living under a theocratic authoritarian regime is awful. But I don't think that President Trump had the plan going into it to be successful like he was in Venezuela just a few months ago.
Yeah, just before Iran, of course, was Venezuela, which was one of the greatest feats of military execution that I think the world has ever seen. And that led people to believe that going into Iran would actually be fairly easy pickings for the USA, and it turned out not to be. You're absolutely right. We 100% agree on the fact that we do need to get rid of the Iranian regime. The IRGC are the biggest proponents and sponsors of terror, Islamist terror across the world. We are aware through illegal immigration in the UK that IRGC members are getting into the country. We're aware that some members of other Islamic terrorist groups are living in council housing in the UK, which means that they are getting funded or they're at least getting subsidised housing to live within our community and to work against us. I was always hopeful that this would lead to something. And whilst I have been somebody who has said, look, this is a good idea, and I think that Trump was right to do it, I just don't think that he's followed through, and I just don't think that he's done enough. And now it feels like he's looking for an off-ramp. Do you think there is an off-ramp for him?
Well, I mean, if there is an off-ramp, it has to come from an American perspective before the midterm elections. I think the Iran situation and the cost of living in the United States are going to hinder Republicans from being successful in November. This is a big issue. Many Americans just can't see the connection. Why did we go? There didn't seem to be a plan. I certainly hope that President Trump and Secretary of War Hegseth and others, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, are working on something. But there is, and I hesitate to say this, particularly abroad, there is almost no way we don't look like a little bit of a black eye coming out of this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it will be a Trump legacy, which will be a shame. So unless he does something dramatic, I think his legacy will be his failure in Iran, because success in Iran looks like not just demilitarizing and getting rid of any capability of nuclear weapons. It would be getting rid of the IRG. One Ayatollah's gone, but the other Ayatollah's in. We don't know in what state of health he's in, but what we do know is there's a long line of succession. We know that they are religiously hell-bent on making sure they stay in power. Now, I am a huge Trump fan. I have been from day one. I'm sure many of our watchers and viewers are too. But we're coming towards the end of Trump now. Trump will be gone in 2029, irrespective of what AOC or anyone else will try and tell you, that he's going to hang on in there and become the king of the United States of America. And there are definitely some people watching this that would love him to do so. But they're in fine shape, I think, the Republican Party. I mean, Rubio and Vance are obviously the front runners to become the next Republican leaders. Now, if they're not in power, then you don't have sort of an official opposition leader as we do in the UK. But nonetheless, they are immediately looking to when they can get into power. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but do you have a favourite? Because it's difficult, and you don't have to answer that directly. Because the reason I would say this, if there's people watching this going, well, I can't believe you can't just say it's one or the other, it's because you just never know who you're going to be working with in the future, and that's very important for someone like you. But do you have a favourite?
Well, let's zoom out and take a look at President Trump's successes, and we'll parlay that into what's going to happen in 2028. I think on tax policy, on immigration, on national security domestically, on crime. We've seen crime rates drop in the U.S. A lot of really great policies, and that's because President Trump has been in the White House. I think the anti-woke, anti-DEI, we would have been in a radically different place with Kamala Harris as president. So President Trump has done a ton of really great things. What does that look like in 2028? I think there are two wings of America First, or MAGA, and they are represented by Vice President J.D. Vance, who arguably he served during the global war on terror. He has non-interventionist views. Some people call them isolationist. President Trump sort of shelved him for most of the Iran situation. And then you have Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who, when he was in the United States Senate, he's got very expansionist foreign policy views. I flippantly say there's not a war he wouldn't like to engage in. And I think those are the two directions, the two options. And I think both of those individuals, I mean, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has done an excellent job with all of the titles that he's been given over the last several months. I think he came to Europe back in, February, and gave an aspirational speech. That's the Marco Rubio that Americans remember from his time in the United States Senate, aspirational. And then J.D. Vance is, I think he's my age. First millennial.
Yes, he's younger than, I'm 46. You're late 30s, aren't you?
Late 30s, and I'm sympathetic, or at least casually supportive of both. In the States, I do work in direct partisan politics in my personal capacity, and so as chairman of a local committee, I try not to weigh in.
Yeah, look, you talked very favourably about both candidates there. I agree with that. I think many people in the comments are saying that J.D. Vance. I think Rubio is good there from Lou D63. Thank you, Lou D. Someone else also said, Lou said this also, that Matthew goes to the Littlewood shop of shirts. What you can't see today is Mark Littlewood is normally wearing like a crazy shirt. He's wearing actually a very conservative dark blue shirt today, but normally he's got the crazy shirt on. But I love your shirt, Mark, and thank you for coming in on what is your vacation. But what I will say is they are in fine shape at the Republican Party, and the future, if you like Donald Trump and you like the way the Republican Party has headed in the last 10, 12 years, looks pretty good. The same can't be said for the Democrats. I think the Democrats, ever since Obama's gone, have looked in disarray. Of course, we got Biden in power, whatever that looked like. We really don't know. He's a very old man and not very good health whatsoever. But the candidates that are being suggested at this moment in time for Democrats just seem utterly ridiculous from our front. AOC, Gavin Newsom, these people seem totally unserious.
Absolutely unserious. Although I will say, for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a lot of folks on the right will sort of pan her for being just a bartender. As somebody who is friends with two Irish bartenders back in the States, I've known them for 17 years. There are few people I trust as much as a regular bartender. But her views are absolutely wacky. Governor Gavin Newsom from California has tanked that state. You see tens of thousands of people fleeing California every year to go to Texas, to go to Tennessee, to go to other states where the tax burden and the cultural burden isn't insane. And then a lot of the woke DEI, that kind of culture war that we're seeing play out in the headlines, people are just tired of it. They're really tired of it, and they say, I grew up a lower middle class white guy. What is the world given me? What is the privilege that I have? I work hard for what I get, and I think a lot of people really are shying away from that and outright rejecting it.
You're absolutely right. There's this myth of white privilege that to people of our generation have been constantly told about, but have never seen the benefit of. And talking of white men, we have the alpha white man himself, Mark Littlewood, my co-host. Mark, join the conversation, please do. I know that you are very interested in American politics. So, Mark, do you have any questions for Matthew? Mark's muted.
Yeah.
Have you muted yourself? There you go. I heard him back there. You're back.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back, Mark.
I'm
Go
back
on, mate.
now.
Say that again, please.
Yeah, Matthew, thanks so much for coming into the show. Fascinating analysis. What I'm really interested about, so I'm delving into a little bit of history here rather than the contemporary side, is over the years, over the decades, the Republican Party has managed to reinvent itself over and over again. So if you go back to the 1920s, its bedrock of support is in the Northeast, right? The New England sort of area. The South is all Democrat. Ronnie Reagan comes in, that flips. Suddenly the South becomes Republican kind of heartland territory. Then Trump sort of flips it again. What they call flyover states suddenly become staunchly Republican. And some other states like Florida, which is always on a knife edge, that now looks firmly in the red column. Ohio used to be, an absolutely crucial state, usually the swing state that would determine who would win. That now seems firmly in the column. Those other blocks around that sort of area, Pennsylvania being one for the Republicans again, absolutely extraordinary. How does the Republican Party or the GOP keep reinventing itself? Because I've got to say it's in slightly stark contrast to the modern British Conservative Party, who seems stuck in a rut, and therefore they've got a challenger party, like Reform have just said, you guys aren't good enough. I know it's nearly impossible for smaller new parties to break through in America, but that means that the parties themselves always go through these reinvention cycles. And it seems to me the GOP, the Republicans, are reinventing themselves in a really interesting way, whereas the Democrats are running off to the far left at the moment. Have I got that right?
Mark, you're absolutely right. And once every about 80 to 100 years in our two-party system in the States, we have what we call realignment, what you've just described. I think President Trump engaged in that in 2016 in bringing in working class and, in fact, some first-generation immigrants. We've seen a boost, immigrants and African Americans or Black Americans. We've seen a boost among Black voters, Hispanics, and then the working class. You mentioned Pennsylvania, Ohio, there's also Michigan and Wisconsin. All four states have a significant number of blue-collar, working-class, people who go out and work with their hands. And President Trump communicated to them. His message resonated with them. And for the last 10 years, we've seen that divide, those voters come over to the Republican Party, where just a couple of weeks ago in the Michigan primary, we have a Democrat, Abdul Al-Sayed, who won, and he won with overwhelming white women with college degrees. And so I don't have any opinions about those individuals today, but I'll tell you the divide between the working class and highly educated people who go off to college or university to learn how great woke DEI and far left policies are, they are voting for these wacky progressives, far left individuals, and the Republican Party is no longer seen as the party of Wall Street and big business, but the party of the working class. And I think that is a large credit to President Trump.
That is so interesting, because I think something similar is, whatever the difference is, and there are big differences as well as similarities in the party systems across the Western democratic world, but it seems to be happening everywhere, right? That the sort of country club Republicans, I guess you would have called them back in the day, very affluent people who would have just automatically voted Republican on a kind of low tax, free market economy, keep government spending under control. And those people similarly back in the day would have voted Conservative in the UK. But that does now seem to have switched. It does now seem to have flipped. And I'm wondering whether what we're seeing is, and especially on, with the MAGA movement in America and the huge rise of reform here and the rise of things like National Rally in France, AFD in Germany, One Nation down in Australia, are we seeing the primary mover of how you cast your vote has basically switched? That back in the 80s, 90s, maybe in the early parts of the 2000s, economics would basically decide how you cast your vote. If you wanted big state, big spending, higher taxes on the rich, the state to have a big role in the economy, you'd vote for the left, the Democrats in America, Labour here, the Socialist Party in France. If you wanted lower taxes, liberalisation of the economy, less spent on welfare, a smaller state, you'd vote Conservative or Republican, or for the Gaullists in France. Now it seems economics is perhaps the secondary issue. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I hope it does, because I'm an economist, right? So I'll be out of work pretty fast if economics don't matter. But it seems culture, nationhood, identity, those are now the driving forces. That if you're a kind of patriotic American, you'll now vote for the Republicans, irrespective really of your views on tax and spend. Whereas if you're a self-doubting American who wants to pay reparations for slavery or some such like, you'll vote on the left. Is culture, nationhood, identity now the principal driver of which party you find yourself in, whereas a generation or two ago, it was basically just economic policy?
The polls really show that out year after year. When Americans are polled, are you patriotic? Do you love your country? Overwhelmingly, people who consider themselves Republicans vote yes, and increasingly, those who consider themselves far left or progressives or Democrats say they are not proud. The other point that you made that I think is an interesting distinction between American politics and the parliamentary systems we see in Great Britain and Australia and Canada is that in the United States we are fundamentally a first past the post, winner take all, two-party system. So no third party could exist. The Republican Party is a vessel whose ideology is embodied by the people who show up. And it is very different than what's happening here. What we see with reform and restore to a certain extent, individuals in a parliamentary system, they can branch out and vote for a third or fourth or fifth party. And we're seeing that play out here. We just don't have that opportunity in the United States. There are two major parties. There have been for about 170 years. And unless a third party comes onto the scene and one, the Republicans or the Democrats take a backseat, we're going to have these two major parties for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, oftentimes that was thought to be the case in Britain as well, that the two-party system would never break, but it looks like it's even shattering in the UK now. Although if you've got that first past the post system, if that sticks, then sooner or later you move to two big blocks in some way, right? Even if you're jostling for preeminence on one side of the ledger, when it comes to it, people we need to unite around a single flag. Now, we had the pollster Patrick Basham from the Democracy Institute on yesterday, Matthew, and he, you and Coxie have touched on the Iran war. He had some rather stark polling data about how unpopular the war in Iran was amongst American voters, and actually suggesting that whether it ends or continues, when by the time of your November midterm elections, could decisively impact the Republican vote. That if it's over, some sort of victory can be declared. It looks like the Republicans would do far better. Do you agree with that analysis? And what's your kind of prediction for those midterm elections? For these sort of wars, I always like how these movies start, but I never like how these movies end. You know, when you're sort of told on day one, great, we can get rid of the horrific Iranian regime, you're kind of willing it on, but oftentimes you just get stuck in the mire and quite often make things worse. Well, that seems to be the view of American voters, and it seems to be quite an important factor in how people will vote in your crucial November elections, right?
I think that polling assessment is spot on. And look, you're an economist. You understand this better than many people. Even if the United States were to wind down things in Iran this week or next week or by the end of the month, the economic implications would have a lasting impact. So the inflationary considerations, the fuel, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, all of those things would have a tail that would last several more weeks or even several more months. I think it's a significant deciding factor. There's not a situation, and I'm happy to say this in front of a camera, there's not a situation where I'm voting for a Democrat candidate. It's just not happening when you've got two parties on the ballot in the United States. But there are a lot of folks who will stay home or who don't think about politics the way we do, and they may switch votes. I'm very concerned about the midterm elections, both the Senate and the House of Representatives. If the Democrats take both chambers, it's going to be impeachments and investigations for the last 2 years of President Trump's term, and that would be very unfortunate for his legacy.
Yeah, sure thing. I guess the thing with term limits there is, which we don't have here, you can theoretically, you can keep running for re-election here until you shuffle off this mortal coil, is that Trump's unencumbered now, right? I mean, he wants his legacy, but he can decide to do the brave and the right things. He doesn't need to stay popular from his own narrow perspective. I know it would help the Republican Party and probably help whoever is finally selected to be the next Republican nominee for president. But do you think that helps that American presidents, if they get to a second term, can kind of, don't need to look at the opinion polls day in, day out? They can actually just focus on being the chief executive. They can actually focus on being the country's leader and actually make decisions based on what they think is right, not what they think will go down well amongst a small cohort of voters in Iowa or New Hampshire, where they desperately need votes in the early primary rounds.
Yeah, I think that's a really great assessment. The second term, the second half of a second term of an American president, he or she could do that. But there are many things they cannot do without the House of Representatives and without the Senate. There are plenty of executive actions President Trump could take in the final 2 years if he doesn't have the House and the Senate, but those could immediately be undone by, heaven forbid, a President Gavin Newsom or somebody like that. So there are many opportunities for the president to maybe take a backseat or put the Republican Party in the backseat, which is not a bad thing necessarily to finish out what he wants to accomplish. But there'd be plenty of roadblocks and hurdles, investigations and impeachments if he doesn't hold at least one of the two chambers.
Matthew, fascinating analysis. Thanks so much. Enjoy your time in London. I fear that my country's going in the wrong direction at the moment, by and large, and your country's going in the right direction. So it'd be great to get you back on soon, even if it's from the other side of the pond, because I think we've got quite a lot to learn from the United States of America. A stunning statistic, actually, is if you looked at GDP per capita, income per capita, the UK overall is now poorer than the poorest state in America. We are behind Mississippi. So every single one of the 50 states in the USA are, on average, richer than us. I think we've got a lot to learn. Matthew, great speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm here because you guys are doing such important work to educate the viewers, educate folks who go out and vote. And so it is absolutely awesome. And very encouraging to see the kind of content and the kind of stuff that you guys are putting together.
Yeah, we absolutely love it. I love you, mate. And it's been great working with you. Look, we're going to get you back on because this has just been absolutely fantastic. Now, we run 10 a.m. British time to midday British time. What time of the day is it where you live at, say, like 11:30 in the morning?
This interview started at about 5:30 a.m. East Coast time. My sister, who lives in Tennessee, will not catch it. It was 4:30 in the morning. But I love time zones. I was up at 3 this morning just waiting to come into the studio and hang out with you guys. So.
Well, we're definitely going to get you back on. But in between that, tell people where they can find you.
I am on Twitter or X. It's Matthew Hurt, MatthewHurtt, and occasionally I write really boring things on Substack at matthewhurt.substack.com.
So great. Matthew, we're going to catch up at some point in the next few days to make sure we celebrate meeting for the first time. Thanks so much for coming on to the show. We'll get you back on as soon as possible. Mr. Matthew Hurt, thank you very much. Look, we've had some wonderful comments, by the way. I'd like to read those out. Lots of them complimentary about Matthew as well. But Paul Hurston Aviation said, great show, Mark and Paul, enjoying it. Valerie Lowe said, great guests for great presenters, hosting a great show. Thank you very much. Valerie Pep 1966 said, great show as always. Look, and yes, please get this gentleman back on. We will definitely get Matthew Hurt back on as long as we can get him up at some very early hour for Matthew. But he was absolutely fantastic. I agree. I knew he would be. That's why I asked him on. Mark. Great interview. Really good stuff. Both you and I were very interested to talk to Matthew, and he didn't let us down, did he?
No, absolutely. I've always been fascinated by US politics. It doesn't map entirely onto British politics. Yeah, sorry, Richard Wild. Can you ask your American guest if he has a view on the crisis of British conservatism? We now have 3 right of centre parties led by unelectable leaders, no vision whatsoever between them. Richard, I'll make sure to ask that question next time, because as I said, I think politically, economically, we've got an enormous lot to learn from the United States of America. If you want to be wealthy, getting richer, have good economic growth, well, there's something in the water supply over there that we don't have in the water supply over here. Something is working over there, and we need to learn from that. And, it was Winston Churchill who said, we are 2 nations divided by the same language. That might well be true, but we are 2 very, very close allies, much similarity in our culture as well as differences. So always good to hear from our friends across the pond.
Yeah,
Coxie, I just wanted to give can I give a little teaser, little preview of what will be coming up later
I was going to tease with Channel 4 update. Were you going to talk about that?
Oh, yes. I'm going to be talking about that after the news. For those of you who were here yesterday, I think I've been stitched up by Channel 4. who made me look, I don't know, like Voldemort or Gollum, or somebody said Data from Star
It
Trek
did
The
not
Next
make you look
Generation.
great.
They did not look great, but I've got an update. I've heard back from them, but I'm going to need some help and advice from you, Coxie, and from our loyal viewers about what I should do next. But I also wanted to tease today's metric of madness, Coxie, if I may. My metric of madness today is a number, but it's got a plus sign in front of it. So the metric of madness today is plus 140,000. Plus 140,000. Now, if you're new viewers, if you haven't seen this section before, each day I find a metric, a number, a figure, a ratio, which tells us something about how mad the country we live in has become. Can you guess what it is? Because a little later in the show, I will be telling you why today's Mark's metric of madness is plus 140,000. You're going to be shocked by the results. You're going to be shocked by the explanation. Tell me in the chat if you can think why that means Britain is mad. Plus 140,000. Any ideas, Coxie?
I don't just yet. Plus 140,000 was approximately the calories I had yesterday. But I don't think that's what you're thinking of. Look, stay tuned, everybody. Common Senses, here's the news.
Hello, I'm Edward Hughes. Here's a quick roundup of today's main UK headlines. Prime Minister Andy Burnham briefly exchanged messages with someone impersonating White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles before realising it was a fake and reporting it. Thousands gathered in Trafalgar Square for a vigil for former Cambridge professor Jason Arday, who died last week after resigning amid plagiarism claims he denied. His family said the public cruelty had been too much to bear. After weeks of extreme heat and drought, heavy rain and thunderstorms are sweeping in, bringing cooler temperatures and a risk of flash flooding on the hard, dry ground. UK house prices also saw their biggest August fall since 2018. That's the latest. Later, Tigers. Hello.
Welcome back, Common Senses. That was the news again. There's never really any good news, is there? But the good news is that Mark and I are here for another 50 minutes before the Ellie Hodges show. Ellie Hodges has got Dan Hodges on the show, no relation. But we've been trying to get Dan Hodges on the channel for some time. He's been telling Mike, for instance, that he'll come on the show since January. He hasn't done. He's come on for Ellie, so Ellie will be asking him the big questions. But we've got another 50 minutes left. We've got a couple of guests coming up. We've got Matthew Hulbert, lefty extraordinaire. I'm going to be asking him some difficult questions, see if he can answer those. I bet he can't, and if he does, he'll be wrong. And we've also got Lewis Schaefer, who is just generally wrong / mentally ill, but that's why we love him so much. But back to Mark. First of all, Mark, I think we should have a Channel 4 update before we go to your metric of madness.
Yeah, so for those of you who were watching the show yesterday, on Friday, I was the token common sensor. Now, that's a little bit unfair, actually. My fellow panelists were perfectly reasonable people, but I was the only person on a Channel 4 forecast podcast discussing the consequences of the Clacton by-election and Nigel Farage. And I was basically on the pro-Farage end of it. I was the only person there. And when I watched back the interview, it was pre-recorded, but when I therefore watched it, I have been made, as people in the chat have testified, to look like some kind of ghoul. There was some sort of filter on me that picked out all of my bad features. Not that I have many of them, Coxie, obviously, but nevertheless, magnifying every wrinkle and crease. And the others looked like they had been sort of sunbathing and down the gym. So I contacted Channel 4 to say, what the hell's going on here? I gave them the weekend to reply. And in fact, in fairness to them, they did reply yesterday. I was told, hi, Mark, I've spoken to the team and no filters were used by us. So it's not clear from our side why there's a difference. The quality color we used was what we received through the gallery before any editing, etc. took place. So I said, what did the gallery put through to you? I don't really care which department at Channel 4 or it is. The two shots above, I gave them two shots of 4 hours apart, same camera settings my end, not much change in natural light. In one, there you go. That's me at 12 noon. That's me in exactly the same seat on Channel 4 at 4 p.m. Okay, I didn't change my camera settings to make myself look catastrophically ugly. I was then further told by Channel 4, coincidentally, a producer actually took a picture in the gallery. because the artwork behind Luke, he was one of my fellow panelists, was done by a friend of his. You can see the quality that came through to us on the right, and the quality that came through was terrible. So it looks like there's just finger pointing going on at Channel 4, right? That this guy's saying to me, not my fault, Gov, that's what I was sent. So I've got to work out who it was in the gallery that stitched me up. I don't know, Pooch and Scarlett and team, these are the people that would know the tech.
Yeah.
But someone, somewhere, did me a wrong, and even if it wasn't the guy that I'm in communicating with, he just seems to be saying to me, not me, Gov, something went wrong elsewhere. Well, I don't know, tell me, should I move on? Should I let bygones be good bygones? Is that the end of the matter? Or do I escalate this? Do I turn up the heat and turn up the volume? What do you think, Coxie?
You're right to raise it as a concern because they're obviously lying, and because we're on YouTube and there's no right to reply, I'm going to say Channel 4 have also said they are lying, and that of course they are. I mean, it's very obvious that they have done something to your image, and it's very obvious why they've done something to your image. It's because they wanted their audience to view you through a certain type of prism, and that prism is dark and ghastly. They did the same thing to Joe Rogan on CNN.
Yeah.
It just made him look.
Some
about
people are saying that in the
older.
chat. I remember that now. Yeah, they made Joe Rogan look grey. They made him look like Voldemort or Gollum as well.
Yeah,
didn't they? That's right.
I'm
remembering that.
We like about Joe Rogan, but he's in pretty good shape for he's a similar age to you. You know, he works out in the same way you do, Mark. You're on the same diet. You do like the cold plunges, etc. So look. I mean, do with it as you will, but I think you're doing the right thing. We've got a platform and we should raise these as issues because we're not doing that. You know, when Matthew Holbert comes on in a minute and he's waiting in the wings, and I will bring him on, we've done nothing to his image. He just looks that bad.
Yeah. Well, we can't sort that out too much, can we? But I always, look, I don't know. As I said yesterday, I was a bit tinfoil hatted about it. Moto Art Design says it's Channel 4. What do you expect? But look, I'm always keen on this show. Mike does it as well, Paul, that, you know, we want to hear from people that we have some common ground with, but we also want to hear from people who disagree with us. And I think it's especially important that when you've got discordant voices, people who are, you know, unlikely to agree with the sort of general tone or tenor or outlook of the show or the channel, I think you've got to treat them with, you know, technically with the utmost respect, right? Because they're coming into, you know, a not necessarily hostile but opposed sort of platform of viewers. And I thought that was what I was doing with Channel 4. I'll speak to anybody and try and put my case forward. But I don't like it if they're trying to, you know, tilt against me, not just in the chat. The Channel 4 chat obviously didn't like me. That's fair enough. They can disagree with me. But I don't like the dice being loaded, Coxie. Level playing field. That's our rule here on UK Live Online, right? Level playing field. Having said that, you're now going to rip Matthew Holbert a new one, aren't you?
I will be speaking to Matthew Holbert very shortly. I've also got Lewis Schaefer in the studio, which is making me incredibly nervous. His arms are much longer than you'd anticipate. He's touching me under the desk. It's all rather inappropriate. But I will go to Matthew. Someone, John Denley, in the comments said that it might have been a Portsmouth fan at Channel 4 that was deliberately doing that, Mark. You know, I don't think there are any Portsmouth fans at Channel 4. I've met a lot of Portsmouth fans, and they haven't got jobs. Even though I am obviously a very big Portsmouth fan, but unlike Southampton, they don't work in Channel 4. Look, before I go to Lewis Schaefer, which I will do, I want to go to Matthew Holbert first. Please, can we play the clip?
Oh, I'm not actually hearing you now, Paul. I'm seeing your lips move, but not hearing you.
Okay, is that a problem?
Oh, I'm hearing you now. Here we are.
Are you hearing me now? Right. Okay, I didn't know if you were having me on then, Holbert. One of your lefty tricks. Matthew, thanks so very much for coming on the show. The reason we say it's Matthew Holbert versus the world is because you are essentially in enemy territory when you're on this show. So big thank you from me to you for joining us. And there are a number of things I want to talk to you about over the coming weeks, but something struck me yesterday, and that was, why would anybody vote for the Liberal Democrats, Matthew? And I'd like you to help our audience understand that.
Great to be with you, Paul, this morning. Thank you. And hi to Mark as well. Well, I'm going to read out something now which will be familiar to Mark from his time in the Lib Dems, which I always like to remind him about, and that is the preamble to the constitution of the Lib Dems, and it will just take me a couple of seconds. So it says, the Liberal Democrats exist to build and safeguard a fair, free and open society in which we seek to balance the fundamental values of liberty, equality and community, and in which no one shall be enslaved by poverty, ignorance or conformity. That's why I'm in the Liberal Democrats.
That all sounds like Niff Naff and trivia to me. What I would say is, sorry, Matthew, but look, we have some absolutely pressing issues today. By the way, Steve Jenkins in the comments saying, "Morning, Matthew. Good to see you on the show again. You're not really in enemy territory here." And I think even people on the right appreciate your open and honest views, Matthew, as do I. But we have some hugely pressing issues facing Great Britain today. We just had Matthew Hurt on the show, who you will probably know from the GB News US show. He's over here on holiday. And, you know, what better thing to do when you're on holiday than go to work. But we really appreciate that. But they have the same issues in the States as we're having here. They seem to be ahead of the curve via Donald Trump. Now, I know you wouldn't agree with that. Feel free to go into that if you want to. But of the pressing issues, which I believe are welfare payments, illegal immigration, some people would say legal, but I think we can park that for now. Illegal immigration, the boat crisis, and the impact it's having on our economy, and the economy being unable to grow under what I would call socialist policies. How are the Liberal Democrats going to deal with those big issues, Matthew? Because they're not going to go away.
No, that's right. And I think, look, most of the seats that we're targeting as a party still continue to be Conservative held at the moment, the ones that we seek to gain at the next election. And so, you know, you may well think that a lot of these issues that you've just raised are going to be top of the agenda. And what are the Liberal Democrats saying about them? Now, as you know, Paul, I'm not some kind of robotic person that just spews out the lines of my party. I'm very critical often of the Lib Dems and of its leadership, and that gets me in some hot water with my friends in the party. But I think, look, you know, if you're going to appear on TV and talk about this stuff, then you've got to be honest. I don't think we talk about this stuff often enough. And I think there's ways to talk about things such as illegal immigration, which is compassionate, which I think is important because, you know, whatever people's views on these matters, these are human beings who are seeking a better life, and there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. I'm very liberal on these matters, as you know, Paul, but I totally accept that it's a major concern for a lot of people and for a lot of our potential voters. So the party does need to be talking about this stuff. And I think what it needs to be saying is that there needs to be a system that is firm and fair, and that we can have a system that is both of those things, that says that, you know, if you're going to come into this country, you need to do so in a legal way. What I would point out, though, is that if we had more safe and legal routes, maybe more of these people would not be risking their lives on the high seas, but would be coming here in a way which is safer for them and for us. So, I mean, I think these are the types of things that we need to be saying as a party.
Yeah, look, Matthew, lots of people in the comments saying they do welcome your presence on the channel, which is fantastic. Lou D actually said that, you know, you're quite sweet, which I can agree with.
Never been called that before.
No, I know. But look, I have to address a couple of things there. You talked about the illegal immigrants being human, which of course they are. Despite the way some of them look, of course. But they are humans. And but also, guess who else is human? The British citizens that some would say that they're invading. And I think parties like Reform, I know invading is not a word you'd use, Matthew, but some parties, particularly like Reform, are saying, look, we want to put those British citizens first. What do you say to that, Matthew?
Well, I think Reform does a very good job of being an opposition party, but I happen to, it's my belief that should they ever end up in government, as no doubt many of your viewers want, that they won't have the first clue what they're doing, and they'll recognise that shouting from the sidelines is far easier than governing, and that all of these issues are difficult. And so, you know, I mean, should that sad day from my perspective obviously ever occur, I think such a government will become wildly unpopular within just a matter of weeks.
No more unpopular, I would guess, than what we've got now. I'm going to hand over to Mark briefly because Mark Littlewood's got some questions for you, Matthews. Over to you, Mark.
Yeah. Thanks. So, in the course of your chat with Coxey there, Matthew, I've looked up the preamble to the Constitution of the old Liberal Party, not the Liberal Democrats, which is a merger of the Liberal Party and the, a bulk of the SDP, not all of it. Some of them carried on. And that reads as follows. The Liberal Party exists to build a liberal society in which every citizen shall possess liberty, property, and security, and none shall be enslaved by poverty, ignorance, or conformity. Its chief care is for the rights and opportunities of the individual, and in all spheres, it sets freedom first. Do you agree with that preamble, Matthew?
I don't have a massive problem with that preamble, but as you quite rightly pointed out, Mark, the 1988 merger, we're getting really geeky now, by the way, but the 1988 merger was of the Liberal Party
and fans of 1980s nostalgia, yeah.
Yeah. It was a merger of the Liberal Party and the bulk of the Social Democrats. I happen to call the remaining what do we call them? The remaining rabble of the SDP, the barely continuing SDP, who managed to carry on despite coming repeatedly behind the monster raving loony party in by-elections. I think William Clouston and those guys should just give it up. Should just say goodbye to what remains of the SDP. But anyway, that's a different matter. Look, I mean, I think the Lib Dems do need to be about two things. They need to be about the individual, because ultimately communities are made up of individuals, but they also need to recognise that there is such a thing as society, and that community is important. So I like to think we take the best parts of the two other main parties. We take the individualism of the Tories and at least to an extent some of the collectivism of Labour, and I guess that's why I'm a Lib Dem too.
Yeah, so on the in all spheres we should put freedom first, if you lean into that statement somewhat, presumably the Liberal Democrats are very worried about, for example, more and more restrictions coming in on advertising. You'd allow alcohol to be advertised on television, gambling. You'd allow junk food to be advertised on posters in the London Underground. This would be a party that in all spheres put freedom first, right? Or do you go along with the ludicrous sort of restrictions that we now have on advertising, to the extent that because you can't advertise unhealthy food on the London Underground, a theatrical production, a play in which the poster featured a wedding cake, they weren't even selling wedding cakes, it just featured a wedding cake, was banned for fear that people seeing this poster and perhaps considering going to the play would think, oh my God, I cannot control myself. I need to go off and eat a load of cake, and the obesity epidemic would run out of control. Presumably you're with me and the old Liberal Party that in that sphere we should put freedom first, right?
Look, I think anyone watching this will be able to tell that I enjoy the odd slice of cake. I mean, probably have too much of it than I should. Look, I think in general I agree with you, but equally I think that sometimes, you know, I'm not a laissez-faire person. I'm not a do what the heck you like person. Sometimes I think regulation is needed. I agree with that in terms of, you know, smoking in most public places. I guess the Liberal response to that would be to say, oh, do what you want. But actually, you know, we know that passive smoking harms other people. And so actually, I thought the Liberal and Social Democratic response was to agree a ban on smoking in public places. So, I mean, I think these things aren't always as simple as you're making out there.
Okay, what about the Liberal Party's old commitment to every citizen shall possess liberty, property and security? Let's touch on the property one. That seems to me a desire that people own their own homes. I know property means wider than that, but we ideally in a liberal society want to live in a society in which everybody owns the house they live in. Rather than one in which a very good number of people are housed by the state. Is that right? So are you a keen supporter of Margaret Thatcher's sell-off of council houses in order to make sure that those people living in them actually then had property? We want more private property ownership, don't we? And fewer people housed by the taxpayer in state-run properties. That's a socialist concept, not a liberal one.
I agree. I do think, though, that, you know, in those days of the 80s, that that was a fair enough policy, but there wasn't enough social housing built after that. So you have people owning their own homes. Great, of course. That's what many would consider the British dream. But there were still people in need of council houses, and I think again that was the problem there. I mean, I'm sitting in my flat here, which I rent. I've come to the conclusion that I probably never will own property. Is that sad for me? Yeah, it is, but it's a realization that I've come to, and I'm afraid I think it's because of intergenerational unfairness. We have things like the triple lock, which no party dare say that they get rid of because they know that the pensioner vote is a big block of the electorate and that they'd be in trouble, as we saw with Theresa May in 2017. But I think a brave party does need to say that younger people are being let down by such policies.
So presumably, I know this would take a bit of time to filter through, Matthew, but property prices in the UK are crazy. If you measure them as a ratio to average earnings, they're mad. I think it's a 7-to-1 ratio. That's to say, you need 7 times the average salary to buy the average house. In London, I think it's more like 11 or 12-to-1. Absolutely crazy that an average property would be 12 times the average wage. In the United States of America, for example, I think it's about 3-4-to-1. I mean, obviously not in Manhattan, but as an overall average. So in order to solve this intergenerational problem, this nightmare that youngsters, not that you're a youngster anymore, Matthew, but youngsters can't get on the property ladder and then get stuck in rental. We need to massively liberalise planning laws, don't we? We need to encourage building. I don't think the state needs to do it. The private sector are better at building houses and construction than the Ministry of House Building. But we obviously need to build many, many more homes. So I'm assuming you can assure me that most Liberal Democrat councils are looking for vast areas in their particular district in order to build houses on them, and aren't typically blocking housing applications and aren't handing out Liberal Democrat campaign leaflets saying, vote for us to stop this development. They're doing exactly the opposite, I would hope. They're saying, build more and more and more and more houses here in Oxfordshire. That's just what we want. Have I got that right? Because my impression is most Liberal Democrat councils seem to be against development. That keeps property prices high. That means fewer people can own a property. That's in part to explain, Matthew, why you've reached the unfortunate conclusion that you'll be renting for the rest of your life.
Yes, and I think there's far too much NIMBYism in my party, and it's something that I often call out. But I have clean hands on this because when I was a borough councillor, 10 plus years ago now, I put through 2,500 new houses in my ward and on Greenbelt land too. It may have been why I lost my seat at the subsequent election, because a lot of people weren't very happy with that in my ward, and I understand that, but I felt it was needed for my village, those new houses. So you can call me many things, Mark, but a NIMBY is not one of them.
Fair. Last point, you said that William Clouston and the SDP should sort of fold their tent. Why don't the Lib Dems just fold their tent and join Labour? I don't think there's anything you've said that Andy Burnham would disagree with. I mean, there'll always be nuances of difference in policy. I know the Liberal Democrats have a long-standing commitment to the introduction of proportional representation, for example, but Andy Burnham even seems to be sympathetic to that. All that you've said so far seems to me, I can't think of any of it that the Prime Minister would disagree with. Why not fold your tent and try and get your ideas through the Labour Party, a party that can win general elections, unlike the Liberal Democrats? You're just a sort of slightly bigger version of William Clouston's SDP. Give up the fight, go and join the main party of the left, which is clearly where you stand, and see what you can do to put them on the straight and narrow from your perspective.
Oh, don't compare a party that has 71 MPs, thousands of councillors, runs 75 councils in charge of billions of pounds of public money, with a party which is seems to be ecstatic at the fact that it's got 5 councillors nationwide. That's just ridiculous.
No, I'm just saying that I think you would have more influence if you folded into the Labour Party. Those 71 MPs that you've got in Parliament, which is an impressive tally for a third party, very impressive tally, but they have no power or influence because they're on the opposition benches. If those 71 were on the Labour benches, you would have many junior ministers. Ed Davey would no doubt be a cabinet minister. You would wield actual power. So why not fold your tent in with them at the Westminster level? You could actually start to get things done rather than always be the third party and typically on the opposition benches, perhaps very occasionally the junior coalition partner.
Well, look at the polls at the moment. I've seen several which suggest that after the next election, Labour will be the largest party, but short of a majority. I think we may well find ourselves onto the government benches, but as Liberal Democrats, and in a coalition which I think our party would be much more happy with than the one that took place between 2010 and 2015. So I look forward to it, guys. I know you two will welcome this. Deputy Prime Minister Ed Davey, it will happen.
Wow. I was very happy with the 2010 to 2015 coalition. That was
Sure
about
you
the most
were.
right-wing. That was about the most right-wing period of government we've had since Thatcher. Matthew, look, great talking to you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Always great to hear from you. That was Matthew against not just Cox and I, but the rest of the world. We'll have you back on soon, Matthew. Coxie, what do you make of that?
Yeah, fair play to Matthew. Thanks for coming on, Matthew. We will have Matthew back on. We do put him under a bit of pressure, but why not? You know, they're essentially he's the establishment. Liberal Democrats, Labour, Green Party, all very similar to me. So thank you for Matthew. We will get him back on. Look, I know what everyone's waiting for. They're waiting for me to talk to Lewis Schaefer, which we will do after the news.
Hello, I'm Edward Hughes. Here's a quick roundup of today's main UK headlines. Prime Minister Andy Burnham briefly exchanged messages with someone impersonating White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles before realising it was a fake and reporting it. Thousands gathered in Trafalgar Square for a vigil for former Cambridge professor Jason Arday, who died last week after resigning amid plagiarism claims he denied. His family said the public cruelty had been too much to bear. After weeks of extreme heat and drought, heavy rain and thunderstorms are sweeping in, bringing cooler temperatures and a risk of flash flooding on the hard, dry ground. UK house prices also saw their biggest August fall since 2018. That's the latest. Later, Tigers.
Oh, thank you, Edward Hughes. Nothing like Hugh Edwards, of course. Mark, before we go to Lewis, let's hear your metric of madness. Plus 140,000. Now, people have guessed, many people have guessed that's around immigration.
Yeah, I thought some people said it's the number of mosques built in the last year or something. Let's play clip number one.
Time for Mark's metric of madness.
So,
Yes.
Coxie, common sensors, my metric of madness today is 140,000 plus 140,000. What could that be? Get this. It is the increase in the total number of civil servants since 2016. I am measuring full-time equivalents. Back in 2016, we had 384,000 civil servants, 384,000 bureaucrats, quite a number, way too high for my liking. That has now grown to 524,000 civil servants. Now, I should say here, I am measuring full-time equivalents, because you get lots of stories about these people working part-time, working from the beach. These are the official numbers on the total number of full-time equivalent positions. So there'll actually be more people than that, because some of them will be part-time 4 days a week or whatever. There was some crazy idea that they should all move to 4 days a week. But since 2016, the number of full-time equivalent civil servants in Britain has gone up from 384,000 to 524,000. That is an increase in the number of full-time bureaucrats by 140,000. Why is this a good metric of madness? Well, does any of you think that the efficiency of our state sector has increased in line with that? Are you finding it easier to interact with the state? Are you happier with the provision of public services? I think not. But there's another reason, Coxie and dear viewers, why this is a metric of madness. It's since 2016, I deliberately picked that date, because that was the year in which we voted to leave the European Union. I know it took a long time to actually bring that to fruition, but we voted in 2016 to leave the European Union. And I don't know about you, but my read of that was that most people wanted less bureaucracy, not more of it. The people who voted for leave were sick of the bureaucrats telling us what to do, the Brussels bureaucracy pushing us around. We wanted less bureaucracy in our lives, and less bureaucracy means many fewer bureaucrats. Well, guess what? If Brussels was a problem, if the European Commission was a problem, if the European Parliament was a problem, if that bureaucracy from Brussels was a problem, We've got a growing problem, homegrown here, common sensors. 140,000 additional bureaucrats have been added to the Whitehall machine in a decade. It's mad, it's crazy. It needs to be not just reversed, but we need to get way below that 384,000 figure. 10 years ago, we voted to leave the EU. We voted to lower bureaucracy, not enhance it. We need to get back to where we were and then drill down a lot lower. That's my metric of madness today, Coxie and viewers.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. I say brilliant, absolutely terrifying. I'm not a fan of big government, and no one watching this is a fan of big government, and that is the very epitome of absolutely massive government. What a sorry state of affairs. And the thing is, without getting rid of them all, which is what Stevie Jenkins and Mr. Fish and Chip said in the comments, we're never going to move a step forward. Look, Mark, I'm going to interview / talk to / yield all of my time for the rest of my life to Lewis Schaefer next. I'm even going to yield Cox's box today because, look, let's face it, no one wants to do anything else than hear from Lewis Schaefer. But before we do, we asked a question to all of our viewers earlier on in the show. Let's put that poll up on the screen if we can. There you go. Who is your favourite? Paul Cox, Lewis Schaefer, love them both equally, hate them both equally. But there's 11% for hate them both equally. I just pip it slightly in the favourite, but love them both equally is the winner, which I'd love to see. Lewis Schaefer, how are you doing, mate?
Thank you very much. It's great to be back with Paul Cox.
It's not the most fake sincerity that I've heard in ages.
I am really happy. I don't care. I care that you've been like doing everything, and I've been sitting at home doing my live stream, and people, I'm surprised at that poll because it was quite high. It was like
for you,
yeah, for me.
Yeah, well, you're like Marmite.
Yeah. That they don't even know who I am. Do you think it could have been polled with anybody else?
It could have been. But look, people genuinely like you.
Chartel, look at Chartel says that.
Yeah,
there.
look at that. Chartel saying Lewis Schaefer is my fave. Look, that's her doing something suspicious with a dog in her profile shot. So I don't know if we can show Chartel, but thank you for watching, Chartel. Please do check on that dog, everybody.
Chantel.
Sorry, Chantal. Absolutely, get that right. He knows because it's actually his account.
Well, she's my only fan.
What you've been up, Lewis? Tell us what you've been up to. Then we can start talking about what you think of me.
I've been like totally depressed because I predicted this thing. I predicted this whole country. Remember, I would say the country's at war. Do you remember I said that?
I don't forget anything you said to me, yes. Lewis. I'm still paying a high-end therapist to work through it.
You have to fasten your seatbelt. And I said the world's at war. So every single problem that we have is at war, but I'm getting used to it. I think we're going to survive.
Who are we at war with, Lewis?
We're like you said, nobody on this program supports high government intervention, and that's who we're at war with. We're at war with people who think that they're better than us, who want to tell us what to do, who want to tell us what. That's what we're at war with.
So we were talking to Matthew Holbert earlier, and because you and Matthew haven't ever spoken, I just didn't feel it appropriate to introduce you to him. He wasn't ready for that. I can imagine the things you might have. There would have been some health advice you would have given him. Maybe.
I would have given him health advice. Maybe he should shave before he's doing the show. Oh, you don't have a shave.
But maybe mine's a bit neater than Matthew's.
There's a beard. You've got a beard.
I've got a beard. That's right. Look, I must say, so Johnny Denley says, I think both Paul and Lewis are both great. I mean, thank you, John. I think we're both great too. But one thing you were saying about Matthew, because he's a Liberal Democrat, is
I think I'm great.
Yes. Lewis is great. Lewis is absolutely great.
You're here.
And you're great. I'm here and you're great.
What will happen when you become what you're becoming is like a huge mega star? It'll be like Morecambe and Wise.
Well, I think when I don't know if I'm becoming a huge mega star.
It'll be like
I do say I've got that tattoo of myself on my chest,
yes.
Which would suggest that I do think of myself. You were saying
go on,
because you were making a really good point about green spaces and the Liberal Democrats. I don't know if our viewers know this. I don't know if you told Mike this about your campaign in Peckham a few years back and what you actually changed yourself to a tree.
I changed myself to the digger that was cutting down a tree, and the best thing I'm going to have to say this. People always say, "What is the best thing about this country?" Beside the men. What is the best?
Besides the men, which is what people do say. I mean,
yes,
I think
they say it about this country, and the loose women, the tight, strong men, and the loose women. But the best thing was, and what it was, the green belt. The idea we can't have consistent, whatever building going on. And this guy, the guy who was on
Liberal
your
Democrat
program,
Matthew Holbert, yeah,
the fat guy, he and there's nothing wrong with being fat, which is why I called him fat, because if
there
was
is nothing wrong. It's a life choice, isn't it?
It is, and it's healthy. You can be totally healthy at any size, Paul. But, and I used to be fat.
You did.
I did.
I mean, you haven't got any pictures of that, but you've remarkably kept that weight off.
Yes, 60 pounds. It wasn't quite remarkable. It is remarkable. It's
no, what is remarkable is the way you've lost the weight by just appearing to eat sort of freshly dead animals and eggs.
Yes, freshly dead animals.
It doesn't feel that way to me. You know, if there's roadkill, you're probably likely to find Lewis chomping on it at some point.
Yeah.
But you've done incredibly well because that weight came off.
Yes.
Probably 5 years ago.
No, 8 years ago.
8 years ago, and you've kept it off. There's a super chat, by the way. I'm just going to go quickly to that. A super chat, which I'm trying to get in the comments there. It's from Seaside Babe. And she said, next poll, who is the better looking?
Yes,
there is a reason I didn't ask for that, because even I know I lose that poll significantly. Lewis is remarkably good looking.
You're young and you're beautiful. I'm like, I've gotten old. Look at my face here. It's like falling down. The point is, you raised a few good points.
Did I?
You did. And then I totally overlooked them, and I should focus on them. The fact is, this guy, this liberal Democratic guy, he's supported building on green space. Totally unnecessary. Before you go on a diet.
Are you talking directly to me now?
I'm talking to that guy.
Oh,
not
okay, to
you.
Matthew.
I love you the way you are.
No, you don't.
I'm like a girl. Actually, you look better now than you did before. There's something healthy.
Yeah, I have lost some weight, and then I put some weight back on. But actually, I was at my peak weight, as in
heaviest,
when we worked together.
Yeah.
And it was you saying to me every single day how ugly, unloved, and overweight I was. It actually made me do something about it.
Well, we know.
It was either that or kill myself.
Yeah, now you're loved, and so that's what's making me unhappy. You need to lose weight, and the way you do that is you've got to eliminate the foods that make you fat and make you want to be fat, which are carbohydrates and sugars, and you've got to just add raw beef,
Raw beef,
eggs, raw lamb, eggs.
Relentless sex.
No, because I've kept the weight off.
Without the relentless sex. There are many. Look, put it in the chat if you'd like to have sex with Lewis.
Any sex. That's I think what you need to do. And what do they want to do? They want to build on places where there are cows living their lives.
Just living their life, doing their shopping.
Waiting to be killed.
It says poll on my screen. Is there another? There's another poll up here. Who is better looking? This is not good.
God.
This is not good. Lewis, oh my God. Look, Lewis on 22%, me on 10%, neither of them on 33%, and equally as handsome on 35%. Equally as handsome, I don't know if that's true.
And 60 votes. That's quite amazing.
That's 60 votes is amazing.
That there are 60 people watching this.
I'll tell you what, that's a good point. Let's mention that. Across the two channels at the moment, there's still well over 4,000 people watching.
That is
That is fantastic. That is genuinely fantastic. Thank you so much. Please do spread the word. Lewis.
Yes.
Lewis, my good friend. I've actually missed working with you. I've never, ever... Do you know what? If I bump into someone who recognises me anywhere...
Yeah, anywhere.
More and more, they still say it. What's Lewis Schaefer like?
What am I?
And I've told you I say this before, and I do say this, but I don't mean it. I often say,
please.
do not talk to me about that man.
Yes.
And then they go off very puzzled. But I don't mean that at all. I absolutely loved working with you. You said that people get dehydrated from drinking water when I was working with you.
Have you heard that that's now true?
Is it now true? The frogs are going.
Yeah.
You also said cancer doesn't exist.
Cancer does exist. It's the multiplication of cells because it's irritated. Irritation causes inflammation, and inflammation is cancer, basically. So if you want to stop cancer from growing, you've got to eliminate carbs and sugars from your diet.
You do. I think
do.
I think you're probably right about that. I do think
and
it
I'm
exists.
a doctor.
You are a doctor, yes.
Yes.
Mike calls me a doctor now as well, believe it or not. That's because I was trying to explain the eclipse incredibly badly last week. But look, there's an image on here. I think it's image number 9, which is a still shot of your. No, that is it. I forgot that was image number 9, but brilliant. So, by the way, this is me kneeling for Jason Arday this morning. Black Lives Do Matter.
Is that really you? No, you're too thin. That looks like
that's
an
an AI image of me,
An AI,
which is both got me kneeling and looking favourably thin. But there is an image somewhere, I think, of one of your live streams, and please do watch Lewis's live streams. And weirdly, in the comments on there,
Oh my God!
it says, I mean, that's actually not too flattering of you, but it says in the comments up there, Paul Cox is apparently good with technology. He's now officially works for Mike Graham. There was a beautiful young lady on his channel, I think, at 2 p.m. So I'm not sure what any of that was about, really. I'm not particularly good at technology.
Well, my stream is me doing as little as possible. And like you're here, you've got to read the newspapers, you've got to talk about things, you've got to find the guy to speak to from the Liberal Democratic Party. I mean, it's barely a party. I don't even know what those guys, nobody knows what those guys do. There's something evil about them.
The Liberal Democrats are evil. But
sorry to interrupt, we've got another image that's been requested.
Another image that's been requested. Oh, there he is.
Oh my God.
There he is. Even I look thinner than Fat Lewis.
By Mark Littlewood, that one.
That is
it's a fat Louis Schaefer.
That's what happens if you don't eat recently dead animals and eggs.
Basically, it was true. Basically, I would have bowls of cereal, and I think I was being healthy because everything we've been told in life is a lie. And
everything.
Everything. It's a lie. And the Liberal Democrats would like to be the party of the lies.
Who is the party of the future to save Great Britain, Louis Schaefer?
I don't know.
I have never, ever seen you speak.
Because I remember we were not allowed to mention this man's name.
But we are now on Mike Graham's channel.
I don't know.
And you can say whatever you like. Mike Graham's dedicated a whole hour to you once a week. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
So, but go on, you say what you like.
I think someone along the lines of Tommy Robinson.
I had a feeling you might say that. You've always had a
not always had a liking for the guy.
Okay.
I didn't like the guy at all, and I didn't like. I mean, there needs to be a rebel leader in this country who's going to stand up for the country. The people like you, worthless English people who've got nobody speaking for them.
The worthless English
people
just,
like you,
just like me.
And you're proud of being worthless.
I am quite proud of being worthless. I represent
the
great cohorts of worthless people.
That's why you are going to be a huge a star, and I wish I was nicer to you when we worked together.
I'm still going to look after you, Lewis. I need you around me.
I don't believe that. They always say that. Then they never call you. They never write. They never put you on the show. Just because you called somebody fat. It's supposed to be not even a problem to call somebody fat, but you call somebody fat, then they don't want to see you anymore.
Oh, I don't mind. You called me fat every day and got paid to do so.
Yes, and you are fat, but you are fat. You know, but luckily you're on TV, so you'll get some girls interested in you.
The girls are interested.
Yes.
Mainly they're over 60.
That's a great age to be.
Yeah. You think so? Have you got any girls on the go at the moment, Lewis?
Well, my girls they're not on the go. They're hobbling. That's the girls that I like. The girls that aren't going to be demanding.
We should ask in the comments, does anybody have a question for Louis Schaefer? Because I could ask almost anything of Louis. So Louis speaks the truth from the hip, no filter. That is from Chaz638.
Look, good to see you, Chaz.
Yeah. Who else? Let me just. There was another.
But that's not a good thing to have no filter. I need a filter. I wish I had a filter. Like when I said water was dehydrating. People looked at me like I'm insane, and I don't want.
People look at you like you're insane, Louis.
Yes.
So I can't imagine why that would ever be.
Because I see the truth. This is what happened to me. Lies. I hate lies. I hate lies and liars. And this country, this country is a secretive country. All the decisions are made secretly, and they never tell you exactly why.
If you had to choose one of the genders, who's the biggest proponent of lies, men or women?
Well, I mean, obviously, women have to lie.
Why do women have to lie, Lewis?
Because they're smaller than men and they're afraid that, something bad's going to happen. So they have to lie.
Well, that's probably true. I mean, very
And they
depressing,
told me
but
that
very true.
And they told me they loved me.
And do they?
Not anymore.
Coxie, I've got a question.
Is there any
Paul,
question?
I've got a question.
Oh, brilliant. Is that Mark? Oh, right.
Yeah.
Thank God for that. Mark, come in.
Mark is
Yeah,
not
can you?
fat.
No, Mark is not fat.
Can you? No, but I am, according to Channel 4, dead, which is worse than being fat, right? Can
Well,
we
you look
put
much
back up
older
that?
than you are, but you're not dead.
Yeah, well, that's the smoking and the drinking. Can we pull back up that image from Lewis's show that we had on a minute
With the
ago with the
American
chat
flag?
and the right-hand side? Have we got that image, Scarlett and team? You know the one up there. Now, have a look at this. So I think this tells you something about Lewis's. Paul has already read out. Paul Cox is apparently good with technology. He now officially works for Mike Graham. There was a beautiful young lady on his channel, I think at 2 p.m. Well, at the moment, UK Live Online doesn't broadcast at 2 p.m. We will be in the future. We're building out the channel big. But put that image up again, because I'm interested in whether that 2 p.m. thing, was that on your OnlyFans channel then, Paul? Because it certainly wasn't on UK Live Online. But a bigger standout, and I think this speaks to Schaefer's audience. Look at the second comment. Fuck schools. Is that the kind of audience you're targeting your show at? Is it, Lewis? Yeah.
Look, I'm against the public school system. I'm against the government paying for schools to brainwash people. They should not be in control of our educational system. And I think in general, too many people go to school.
Oh, so that wasn't schools teaching people to make love?
Or they should be schools about fucking. Sorry.
You don't have to apologise. You're here on YouTube, and it's absolutely fine, Lewis. You can just be you.
It sounds bad. People don't think of me as a guy who curses. They think of me as a lovely guy. What is the question you're asking? What is the question you're asking, Mark?
Are the people of that sentiment, F schools, your key target audience for your show, Lewis?
That they think that schools are bad. They think that there should be a school called to teach people how to F you.
Ah, got it. Yeah. Okay.
Nice.
Well, that's probably
So
quite a
what
big audience then, in fairness. Yeah.
The people who listen to me are people who want to hear something new. They want to know that water is dehydrating. You shouldn't be sitting here drinking tons and tons of water if you want to be healthy.
So they want to hear something new and mad. New and mad.
Yes, it could be mad. They want to know when someone says we need to build more homes, that is against the British people. There are enough homes. We've got to stop divorce to prevent people from needing more homes.
There you go.
Why is that funny? My own tin is here laughing.
It's just great policy, Lewis. I don't know why nobody's picked it up.
Because no one discusses it. Say, why?
No one does discuss it.
We've got to stop letting people into this country. Dirty, dirty foreigners. You've got to stop them from being let into this country. From marrying British women who then suck the semen out of the man and create children and then stop them from seeing their own children.
Look, after our show is Ellie Hodges. I want to get her in now before we get down to either the channel being cancelled or there being no one left to watch. Let's get Ellie in now. Let's do a. Lewis, thank you so much, my friend. We'll definitely get you back on.
I have missed you, Paul.
I've missed you too, Lewis. I think it's your sensible thinking that I've missed the most. So Ellie Hodges is with me now. She's just taking. Sorry, I need to look into this camera. It's just much like you, viewers and listeners. It's difficult, when you've got Lewis Schaefer in your orbit. It's like the moon. It's kind of pulling at you, making all your organs want to come out. But we do have someone sensible with us now. The Ellie Hodges show is coming up. Good morning / afternoon, Ellie. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. I don't know how I'm going to follow Lewis there.
No, you never tried to follow Lewis.
I was literally in the room for about 30 seconds and I heard some outrageous things.
Yeah.
But we're going to move on.
That was actually the most sensible things that Lewis said in the 20 minutes that we were talking. So I think that's why you were kept out of the room, Ellie. It was like Please, Ellie is for the future. Please do not intoxicate Ellie with. You wouldn't believe how much love there is for Lewis in the comments. You'd think that people would be clamouring to say, "Who is this guy? Why is there not a nurse involved?" But Ellie, tell us who's on your show, what you're up to today.
I've got a fabulous show lined up today. I'm really, really excited. And as I said, I wanted my show to actually have people with different opinions on and have actual debate, not confrontation by any means, but just a discussion. So I've got Dan Hodges on, who is not a relative of mine. About the 20 millionth time I've said this, but he is not a relative of mine. Dan Hodges will be joining me for the first half of the show, and then I've got Gawain Towler on afterwards to maybe respond to some of the things that Dan Hodges might say. That should be quite interesting. And then to end the show, I've got Jack Hadfield, who was at Jason Arday's memorial service at Trafalgar Square. So he's going to report back and tell us all about that. So we're really excited show lined up, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. I like the fact that you said you like to have serious and sensible guests on, like that was an attack on the Littlewood and Cox show, because I don't think there was anything unserious about Lewis Schaefer.
Oh, no, of course.
Well, I'm going to hand over to Ellie very shortly because it's now midday. Thank you ever so much. Thank you ever so much to Mark Littlewood. Thank you ever so much to Luke the Duke and Scarlett and Pooch. Thank you ever so much to all of our guests. We had Andrew Allison, we had Matthew Hurt all the way from the US of A. We had Matthew Holbert and we had Lewis Schaefer. Anything to say before we go, Mark?
Yeah, what a blasting show. Absolutely fantastic. Common sense coming out of my ears, Paul. We've had so much common sense today that I think I'm just about building up the courage to leave this bunker. We'll see. We'll see. I might need another day or two to steel myself. So we're very clear that Ellie isn't Dan Hodges' daughter. Not married to Dan Hodges either, Ellie? Is that right?
I don't know if Ellie... Well, Mark was asking then that you're not related and definitely not married to Dan Hodges.
No, we are not related.
I look forward to the first half of your show being all about... But why don't we get Lewis in to ask the questions?
I definitely want Ellie to renew my challenge to Dan. Dan and I had massive Twitter exchange at the weekend. It's fantastic. My Twitter viewership went through the roof thanks to engaging with Dan Hodges about the use of private investigators by political parties and journalists. So, Ellie, please reiterate to him, I stand ready to debate him on this issue anytime, any place, anywhere. Can't wait.
Dan Hodges, if you want to get your exposure up on Twitter, start a conversation with Dan Hodges. That was what Mark's point was, and that's absolutely correct. Unfortunately, Dan's really clever as well, so that's putting us to shame. But you will see Dan Hodges on with Ellie Hodges at 12 o'clock. But Common Sense is, I'm not back until tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you for all your support. Support Ellie. Over and out.
Hello, I'm Edward Hughes. Here's a quick roundup of today's main UK headlines. Prime Minister Andy Burnham briefly exchanged messages with someone impersonating White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles before realising it was a fake and reporting it. Thousands gathered in Trafalgar Square for a vigil for former Cambridge professor Jason Arday, who died last week after resigning amid plagiarism claims he denied. His family said the public cruelty had been too much to bear. After weeks of extreme heat and drought, heavy rain and thunderstorms are sweeping in, bringing cooler temperatures and a risk of flash flooding on the hard, dry ground. UK house prices also saw their biggest August fall since 2018. That's the latest. Later, Tigers.
Hello everyone and welcome back to UK Live. This is the Ellie Hodges Show, midday until 1 o'clock. It might go a little bit over today though because we've got such a fantastic lineup prepared for you all. So we've got Dan Hodges, who is not a relative of mine, again in with me first. We're going to be talking all about reform, the challenges they're facing at the moment, also if there is any positives that Dan's willing to share, talking all about reform. We'll also talk about Jason Arday a little bit as well. And then after that we've got Gawain Towler coming on, who I'm sure all of you know. We'll be discussing everything that Dan has mentioned in his interview with me coming up very, very shortly, and all things reform, because we've got a hell of a lot going on at the moment. And then lastly, we've got Jack Hadfield joining me, who's going to be talking all about Jason Arday's memorial service at Trafalgar Square, what that was like and what we can learn from everything that happened and the tragic loss of life there. So firstly, Dan, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, of course. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And as I just said, I really want this show to be about having genuine discussions and it not being confrontational, but actually learning why you think the way you do. And I'm sure that we definitely disagree on lots of different things.
Sure we do.
But I'm sure we can find some common ground
We'll try,
as well.
We'll try.
So Dan, you've written that it's time for reform to move on from Nigel Farage. That's kind of been your biggest thing recently, I would say, and it's quite an interesting take because lots of people would argue that reform is Nigel Farage, and without him, what is reform? So why do you think that it's time for Nigel to step away?
Well, for a number of reasons. I mean, but I'd start off by countering what you just said in the question, because and I know that is the common perception. Reform is nothing without Nigel Farage. And I don't agree with that for a number of reasons. I think, firstly, whether people like it or not, reform are basically a fixture in British politics now moving forward. They've occupied a space in British politics which obviously was being neglected and had been neglected for years by the mainstream parties. And I don't think that group of support that they've cultivated is simply going to disappear or simply just drift back en masse to any of the other parties. I think the second thing is, I think it's unfair to the other people in reform, this sort of narrative that, you know, Nigel Farage is the only person that makes reform, keeps reform ticking. I mean, I and I said in my piece, you know, I remember sitting down with Richard Tice and spending a good couple of hours listening to him articulate what I thought was a very realistic and pragmatic and potentially effective policy programme for reform. He'll hate me for saying this, but I like and get on with Lee Anderson, who I think is a very genuine and authentic voice for his constituents and reform supporters. And even, you know, someone who gets a lot of criticism, Robert Jenrick, who I think, you know, again, I said in the piece I wrote, I remember sitting down with Robert Jenrick and him articulating a sort of a vision for the right moving forward that is one of the most compelling visions I've heard. So again, this idea, it's Nigel or bust, is just not something I hold much truck with. But the fundamental problem is this. For years, Nigel was, I think the description would be, he was a Marmite character. Some people loved him, some people didn't like it. But that is the problem. Nigel has moved from being someone who was relatively split evenly in terms of the people who liked him and the people who disliked him, to someone who in the latest, I think it was Ipsos poll, showed that 25% of those people asked said they like him. 65% of those asked said they didn't like him. And that was markedly different to the leaders of the other parties. Even within the groups of, so take somebody like Andy Burnham, who at the moment is relatively popular. There were a group who quite liked him, slightly less a group who disliked him. But there was still a significant group with Andy Burnham of people who just hadn't formed an opinion, or he simply didn't sort of motivate a significant or strong opinion within them. That's not the case with Nigel. And what you're seeing now, we saw it to an extent in Clacton, but we've certainly seen it in the other major by-elections, is that whilst he can motivate his base, he also now motivates the anti-base, if you like, and he is now a driver for those people who really object to and don't like reform. And on those the political reality is on the sort of numbers that we're seeing, it's just not politically sustainable. His personal brand has become too toxic.
I do understand your point, and I do think on Richard Tice, he doesn't get enough credit for kind of keeping the party going when it wasn't at the top of the polls.
Yeah, absolutely.
But do you not think it's fair to say that Reform's actual supporter base, when they think of their party, they think of Nigel Farage? And when you look kind of at the polls, when Nigel Farage did come back into the party, that's when the polls started going up. There's a direct correlation between Nigel Farage and polls going up in terms of Reform.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But obviously when Nigel Farage came in, first of all, Reform's poll rating did go up in the election, but they secured 4 MPs. Obviously, subsequent to that, as Keir Starmer collapsed, obviously the Tories had their worst election result in living memory. Obviously, there was a reaction amongst the public to a fact that they'd invested their hopes in Keir Starmer, and he'd basically let them down, and that was a big part of it. But if you look at what's happened, and again, I've been writing about this for the best part of the year now, Reform peaked at around about 30% last October. After that, they plateaued, and since that, they've been in relatively steady decline. I think they're now down, sort of averaging 23, 20, 24 points. And that's in the opinion polls. That's when people are being asked, how do you vote if there's an election tomorrow? So even built in within that is a significant vote of Reform support that whilst they're expressing anger with the main parties, when it comes to choosing the next government, they will look elsewhere. You then factor in, as I said, the very active tactical voting, very active and in some cases organised tactical voting that is taking place by people who just don't want reform. I mean, I saw this in Makerfield. I was, spent a lot of time in Makerfield. I was out in the constituency on polling day. I was speaking to these women who literally were saying, "I've voted Tory all my life. I'm voting for Andy Burnham." And they weren't just saying, "I'm voting for Andy Burnham because I want to get rid of Keir Starmer." They were saying, "I'm voting for Andy Burnham because I'm not going to vote for Nigel Farage and reform."
You also see that the other way, though, as well, when Tories are saying, actually, no, I'm never going to vote Tory again, I'm going to reform. That goes both ways. And I think Andy Burnham is a very specific example there because of Makerfield. And do you buy the argument that reform puts forward that the reason that Andy Burnham got such a large amount of the vote in Makerfield is because it was a vote to get Starmer out?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was a huge, I mean, that was the defining issue of the election. But I also said at the start of that election that that's what I thought was going to happen, and reform didn't. And you'll remember, because you obviously covered it yourself. At the start of that election, a lot of people around reform genuinely thought reform could win that seat and would win that seat. That's why it was perceived it was such a huge electoral gamble for Andy Burnham to actually stand there in the first place. And as I said, whilst there's the key issue was obviously to get rid of, well, the three issues. There was obviously an element of let's get rid of Starmer. The reality is Andy Burnham was personally very popular in that seat. He was seen as from the area, people liked him. But as I said, there is now a very, very clear, significant. We've seen it in a run of by-elections going back to, where was it, in Wales, where Reform were expected to win, and Plaid actually picked them at the end. There is a very, very active anti-reform vote, and that is because reform, and it's almost part of the strategy now, reform are running what is effectively a core vote strategy. They are desperately trying to, because of the decline in the polls, because of the perceived threat from Restore, they're desperately trying to cling on to their core base. I mean, we've seen it, obviously I'm sure we'll come on in a moment. I mean, we're sitting here speaking, Tim Montgomery has literally just been suspended.
Yeah, let's talk about that
reform.
now, actually. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because, I mean, I'm quite split, because I think that on one hand, you need people in a party that are going to criticise policies and call them out when necessary. But also, if it is true that he has been briefing the media and leaking certain information, you also can't have that in a party, can you?
Well, I don't know if he's been leaking information. I mean, he's made a couple of what I would say are not particularly aggressively hostile observations. One was he thought it was a mistake for Nigel Farage not to go to the count, which I think most people accept, and certainly other people in Reform openly, privately conceded to me. I mean, I think the key thing about this, and this is the big problem in terms of Reform's broader strategy, it seems to me the main reason he's been suspended is he's committed the cardinal sin of basically confirming what people like me and my colleagues have been writing for a good couple of weeks now, which is, I mean, and you cover Reform, so you're as aware of it as I am, that obviously there are splits in Reform. There are very significant splits in Reform, and there are particularly splits in relation to Zia and Zia Youssef.
Yeah.
Now, senior Reform figures, I saw, I think, who was it, Richard Tice, at a recent press conference. I saw a clip, Richard Tice and Robert Jenrick saying, oh, this is all just rubbish, it's all being made up. It's not being made up. You know exactly what the reality is. Tim has articulated that, but because Reform and Nigel are so defensive at the moment, I mean, Labour's running around going, Nigel Farage is being a snowflake. He's right. Nigel Farage is being a snowflake at the moment. He's just reacting in an incredibly thin-skinned way to any sort of perceived opposition, internal or external.
But do you think these issues are suddenly going to be solved if Nigel Farage is no longer part of the picture?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think certainly the Zia Youssef issue would be solved, because at that point Zia Youssef, I mean, the reason why Zia Youssef is still in reform is because basically Nigel is effectively keeping him there. As soon as Nigel goes, Zia goes. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I think there are broader organisational problems in terms of how reform is managed with Nigel. I mean, you saw it with the Clacton stunt. So, for example, the decision to stand in Clacton was taken by a very, very tiny number of people around Nigel, his inner circle. Other senior figures in the party weren't even told until a couple of hours before his speech what was going on. So I think some of those problems would be resolved. I think, as I say, the excessive sort of defensiveness around Nigel would be resolved. I think another big issue which we haven't talked about is obviously the other, it's not an elephant sitting in the room, the other issue that is completely destabilising reform are the ongoing issues in relation to Nigel's financing, the donation, etc.
But do you not think that Clacton showed that Nigel's supporters don't actually really care about that?
What Clacton showed is, as I said, that there is a remember that's the safest reform seat in the country.
Sure.
So hardcore reform supporters, plus people in the constituency who quite like Nigel Farage as their MP, they support him, but that is not reflected in the wider country. And I used the example and the analogy, obviously, we had the situation with Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn was thrown out of the Labour Party ultimately because he was just refused to accept the anti-Semitism that had been infecting the party. He stood as an independent in Islington.
Yeah.
Everyone predicted he would lose, and he won. But that didn't resolve the fundamental issues relating to Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, or dramatically shift the political weather. And this idea that some of Nigel and his allies are spinning, oh, that's it, the issue is, the case is closed against Nigel because of the result in Clacton. Obviously, that's not the case.
Mm. And you also say that you think reform have kind of gone past its peak and there's no kind of coming back. What would have to happen to prove that you're wrong in that?
They'd have to go up again in the polls and get
That's
back
what
up
it
to
defines,
31,
okay.
32%. That's
But I mean,
what
it's quite a strong claim to say that you think that they've just completely gone past their peak and there's no returning.
Well, I mean, I don't say there's no returning. I don't see, as I said, I don't see how they return with Nigel as leader. As I say, I don't. If you want to look forward, as I say, I don't think reform are going to go away as a political force in this country. And I think also, if you want to look longer, obviously Andy Burnham is enjoying a bounce, a honeymoon, whatever you call it. I think it's probably a little bit more substantial than a bounce. But the fundamental issues facing Andy Burnham and facing the country aren't going to go away. But I think there are opportunities for reform, and there continue to be political opportunities for reform. But the fundamental thing reform have to do, and they had an opportunity last year. They had the opportunity where they were at 30%. And actually, I remember speaking to people inside reform who at the time were saying this was going to be the strategy. They were going to start to move away from the core vote strategy, and they were then going to start to try and appeal beyond reform's core supporters to that sort of floating block of voters that they require if they want to get the sort of support that they can form a majority. And for reasons I don't quite understand, I think it was partly to do with fears over the Restore split, but for reasons I can't understand, they moved away from that strategy. So they had a whole strategy if they were going to appeal more to women, they were going to appeal more to people in the centre, and that whole strategy got ditched.
Mm. And you are talking, as I said at the start, a lot about Nigel Farage not being a leader. Who do you see as the next leader?
I mean, I wouldn't want to sort of condemn anyone by giving them my endorsement, but in all seriousness, I mean, as I said, if Nigel goes, Zia goes, but then you have, realistically, it seems to me it would be it would probably be a straight fight between Robert Jenrick and Richard Tice. Is realistically how you would see it, and that they both of those have their faults, but they also have their qualities as well. I think, you know, Richard has got certain questions he's got to, you know, he's going to have to answer in relation to the sort of swirl of finances around him. But as you said, he is somebody who I agree with you. I don't think he gets enough credit for the work he did in basically keeping reform going when Nigel walked away for that period. And Robert, I mean, if he could learn to just slightly curb his quite sort of his completely naked ambition, is, I think, a serious political operator. I mean, I think the thing with Robert that would be interesting is so much of the problem with Robert is, as I say, he's so nakedly ambitious. He's always working in angle positioning, you know, ditching positions he used to hold to try and appease, you know, align with whichever way the political current is currently running. If he could get beyond that and actually you had Robert Jenrick in a position where he was leader of a political party, then I think the more sophisticated, mature, thoughtful Robert would come through, and it would be very interesting to see what he would be like in those circumstances.
I do want to talk to you about Restore, but before we go on to that, I just want to acknowledge that lots of people do say that you have been quite one-sided in just your attack against reform, and you don't hold the other parties to account in the same way. Would you agree with that you're kind of personally going after the Reform Party?
No, I wouldn't. And the reason I wouldn't is literally people were saying exactly the same thing to me about in relation to Keir Starmer. Just before he was removed, they were saying the same things when I was writing about, you know, Angela Rayner. They said I had exactly the same criticism when I was scrutinising Jeremy Corbyn, Boris Johnson. When I first started writing, I was writing a lot about Ed Miliband, and I was criticised about being obsessed with Ed. So that just comes with the territory. That's what happens when you know, and I understand it. You know, a lot of people invest, you know, their hopes, their dreams in various individuals. Obviously, we're seeing that very much with Nigel at the moment. So when people start to criticise them, people get upset about it. But that's the nature of the job.
And if you had to say some of the things that Reform are actually doing right, what would you say?
Oh, well, look, I mean, I think fundamentally, I think the thing I would praise Reform for the most is, and it's quite a big thing, so, you know, I'm not damning with faint praise here. I mean, I think Reform and Nigel Farage have completely transformed politics, and, you know, I'll get absolutely kicked from the other side for this, but I think in a positive way, in the sense that, and you can see this with Andy Burnham, actually. I mean, I think, I don't know who wrote it, but I think somebody said, you know, if it hadn't been for Nigel Farage, we wouldn't have Andy Burnham as Prime Minister, and I think that's absolutely. I mean, some people may not thank Nigel for that. But no, I think that's right, because I think what happened is, for years, there was a huge block of the electorate who were basically, at best, ignored, at worst, patronised, and at the very worst, you know, held in open contempt by both of the mainstream parties, and that is a big block of what I would, it's a bit simplistic, but would call sort of working class Britain. And I saw that because I used to work for the Labour Party, and I saw how under Blair we literally, you know, moved away because there was an entire strategy of we can't win unless we appeal to Middle Britain and all that sort of stuff, and that just became an onward drift in which working people were completely sidelined and ignored, and you know, Nigel Farage and Reform, obviously Brexit was a big part of that process, have now given a voice to working people in a way that has completely transformed politics. So that would be, if you wanted me to highlight a positive, it would be that.
Do you think that Reform, this is something that I actually call Reform out on, is that I don't think they show enough optimism, and I think that the British public are very fed up with the state of this country at the moment, and I think they need some optimism of, okay, we can make things better, and I don't know if the framing of Britain is broken, which is a phrase they use a lot, is the right one. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely right, and I think Reform generally. So again, we've been talking about, you know, I mean, Zia Youssef running around calling everybody, calling the world and his wife or the world and her husband, a traitor on everything, the stuff with Ben Wallace. I mean, it's just, it's completely aggressive and unnecessary and counterproductive. But I think in particular, I think that is one of the big problems that Nigel's got at the moment. I mean, because you know him and I know him. And one of the things about Nigel, again, being very simplistic, he was always upbeat. He was always cheerful. Yeah. He was always optimistic. He would have a laugh and a joke, and that's what you used to see. I mean, and it used to work for him. It used to work at a political level. People used to, big issues. He could, even that were problematic, he would deflect with, like I say, a laugh or a joke or a bit of a shrug, and he would move beyond it. And as everybody's literally saying it today, and I think the Tim Montgomery issue is an example of that. That side of him's gone. I haven't seen that side of him for ages, and he's more insular, he's more tetchy, he's more aggressive, and frankly, the problem Reform have got, if you want to strip it all away, if you remember years ago, Theresa May accurately said, Conservative Party's got a brand problem, and the brand problem is we are the nasty party. Mm-hmm. Now the problem for Reform is Reform are now the nasty party. There's a nasty, just unpleasant edge to Reform at the moment, which is not actually, if you know people in Reform, if you know Reform supporters, if you know their leadership, it's not actually indicative or characteristic of who these guys are.
No.
And you know that, and I know that. But the point is, at the moment, because they're trying to, as I said, we'll come on to Restore, I'm sure, but they're trying to cling desperately to this sort of shrinking vote. There's a desperation and there's an anger and frankly a nastiness in their rhetoric and their brand, and it's becoming a vicious circle because people are seeing it and it's turning people off. So people who are saying, "Oh yeah, I am sick of the small boats, and I am really concerned about crime, and I am, concerned about this obsession with the environment to all else." They're seeing Reform politicians and they're going, "Well, yeah, I get what they're saying about the problem, and I think they're right in identifying the problem. But are these really the guys I want to solve it?" That, I think, is their...
I think it's just a simple thing of, yes, there's a problem, okay, how are we going to fix it? And I think that's what the British public want to see, is they want to see a clear answer to how we're going to fix things. And I think that an optimistic tone is what the British public need at the moment. But let's move on to Restore. So do you think they're actually having a big effect on Reform or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are, and I didn't realise it until the Makerfield by-election. And to be perfectly honest, I'd completely dismissed Restore, and actually was having the same criticism of how I engage with Restore that I'm now having over how I engage with Reform, in the sense that I was very I thought they were just a marginal party, and I said at the time when Rupert Lowe walked out, I said, I said, don't know why he's done it, because he's just going to marginal himself and he's not going to be able to overcome Nigel. But for some reason, within Reform, I don't know whether it was Nigel personally, the people around him, Rupert Lowe got into Nigel Farage's head, and he got into the head of the Reform senior leadership. And although Restore were polling, very low numbers, 2%, 3%, 4%, as I said, the strategy that I was told was being constructed, which was to sort of modernise, moderate and broaden the Reform brand, suddenly got ditched, and suddenly people were running around saying, "Oh my God, look at all these clicks Rupert Lowe's getting on social media, and look at the support he's getting on social media, and oh my God, Elon Musk's backing him now. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" And I think that was the beginning of Reform's decline and descent, if you like. And it still seems to be going on. So we had that situation where Rupert Lowe jumped up and said, "Oh, well, let's have a pact." And then we had basically chaos for like a couple of weeks. Should we have a pact? Shouldn't we have a pact? Should we get together? Should they talk? Shouldn't they talk? And where's it all ended up?
Do you think that some of the people surrounding Restore are extremists?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, there are definitely some very, very extreme and toxic elements around Restore. But there's two things I'd say about that. Firstly, these people were until recently in reform, right? You know, Nigel Farage and everybody, and I see all these people in reform saying, oh, they're beyond the pale, they're, what is it, ethno-nationalists and all that sort of stuff. Well, hang on a second. He was one of your MPs until a few months ago, so, you know, and are you really saying he's the only person like that in your party and everything? You know, so there's that problem. So I think, you know, Reform have got a problem there. But equally, the question is, how representative is it? I mean, and again, I can only speak for myself. I was in Makerfield. I went to a Restore event. The people I saw, I'm talking about, you know, people who are out campaigning or whatever.
Yeah.
They weren't markedly different, if I'm completely honest with you. Certainly the people I spoke to, with the people who I'd met a few months ago when I was at Reform Conference, or I've seen at Reform Conference, they had the same issues. They seemed primarily to me to be ordinary people, primarily working from a working class background.
So why do you think they are ditching Reform for Restore?
Look, you're in a better position to know this about than I am. I think, again, I think, as you're right, I think there are extreme elements in Restore, and I think they've been successful in convincing them that the only way to solve Britain's problems is to have even more extreme policy prospectus. So I think there's a bit of that. I think, frankly, I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. I can't quite get to the bottom of the big Restore Reform split. It seems to be there are so many moving parts to it. I'm not entirely sure where the primary anger there resides. What I do know, like I said, is the big political impact is it's messing with Nigel Farage's head and it's messing with the heads of people inside Reform. That's the big sort of strategic impact of it.
So before we finish up, I'd like to talk to you about Andy Burnham. So as you said at the start, I mean, he has kind of had and is having his honeymoon period where we've had this Andy Burnham bounce supposedly. How long do you think this will last? Because many people are saying that Andy Burnham on the vibes is great. And I agree with that. I was in Makerfield. I saw the vibe that was being given off there. Lots of young people with Andy Burnham signs, you know, dancing around with music. It looked great. But that only lasts for so long. Do you think once he actually starts having to deal with some of the big issues, things might start going a bit downhill for him? Yeah,
they definitely will. But the question is, how long? You know, what sort of time period are we talking about? Because I think Andy Burnham is good at the vibes. You know, I wrote a piece. I think you retweeted it, which was about how that's another thing. You know, how Labour have now supplanted Reform in terms of social media, media management and output. And so Andy Burnham's very good at that. But I think people mistake the fact that because Andy Burnham's good at the vibes, there's nothing behind it. Now, the thing is, I mean, as I said, you know, I know Andy, I like Andy, I've been criticised for saying that, but I'm just going to be honest about it. And as part of that, I know that when he, you know, in terms of his focus, which is very much, you know, it's pretty similar to what I was saying. Look, working class people have been ignored, people up north have been ignored. We need to rebalance that. He's very sincere about that, and he means it. And I think, which is why I agree, I think it's more than just a bounce. But as I said before, however sort of sincere Andy Burnham is, and however good he is at political communication, the reality is the big political problems, the small boats, concerns about immigration more broadly, defence spending, the economy. We've got this huge impact that's still not been felt yet of what's happening in Iran and all that sort of stuff. That's going to have a huge economic impact. Welfare, you know, the spiralling welfare bill, the environment, etc. Those problems aren't going to be solved by vibes. So eventually reality is going to bite. Now the question is though, I mean, I wrote about this at the weekend. I think he has potentially got about 6 to 8 months of maybe, because the other thing is I think he looks different enough to Keir Starmer and the people who preceded. People will give him the benefit, the doubt for a while, but it won't last long. So if I was going to bet, and this is entirely unscientific, I'd say 7, 8 months, tops maybe a year of sort of peak Burnham. Now,
even that long?
Yeah, no. I mean, look, if we've got a situation which let's reverse it. If Reform keep getting in, you know, if Reform just keep being the shambles that they're being at the moment, people still are obviously still very unhappy with their memories of the Tory party. Zach Polanski and the Green wrote this as well. Zach Polanski and the Greens are completely blown it. They've just become like pseudo-Corbynites, which was a big problem for Labour as well. Those things, if he's lucky, he'd need a lot of luck. Then I would say, if I was going to judge 7 or 8 months, but maybe a year. Now the thing is, politically, the other thing is, I think within that window, I think we'll have had an election as well by that stage. So, but that's it. But then something could happen, and Andy Burnham could be plumbing Keir Starmer levels of unpopularity in a few weeks' time. The one thing I would say though is, I keep seeing it. I keep seeing reform supporters going every time there's a single poll which has a single minor dip for Labour or a single percentage point increase in reform. Suddenly, not just reform supporters but senior reform politicians like Richard Tice and Zia and Nigel are suddenly rushing out on social media going, oh, look, we told you. The Burnham bounce, it's over, we're back. And it's like, and that, for me, again, is another sign of their desperation and that Andy Burnham is also in their heads a little bit at the moment.
Dan Hodges, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank
I
you
really
for having me.
appreciate you giving me your time, and we can clarify that we're not related now.
We are not. And I'm
Thank you
so
very
sorry
much.
for that misinterpretation.
No, it's funny. Thank you very much for your
Thanks for
time.
having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Right, shall we go to the news now? Let's go to the news.
Hello, I'm Edward Hughes. Here's a quick roundup of today's main UK headlines. Prime Minister Andy Burnham briefly exchanged messages with someone impersonating White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles before realising it was a fake and reporting it. Thousands gathered in Trafalgar Square for a vigil for former Cambridge professor Jason Arday, who died last week after resigning amid plagiarism claims he denied. His family said the public cruelty had been too much to bear. After weeks of extreme heat and drought, heavy rain and thunderstorms are sweeping in, bringing cooler temperatures and a risk of flash flooding on the hard, dry ground. UK house prices also saw their biggest August fall since 2018. That's the latest. Later, Tigers.
Hi everyone, and welcome back. That was the news. I hope you enjoyed that segment with Dan Hodges. I know some of you might not be the biggest fan of him, but I thought it's good to have an honest conversation and have a discussion with people that we disagree with and ask him questions that I wanted to ask him, and I thought that was pretty good. Let's read out some comments. So I think Ellie is a very good interviewer. She is letting him speak and is exposing his views rather than just getting in a slanging match. That's true as well. I want to let him speak, and I try and do that with my guests as much as possible, is actually let them speak so we know what they think instead of constantly interrupting and criticising every single thing they say. I really don't get why people don't want to hear an opposing view. You need to put your own views up for scrutiny by hearing the other side. Otherwise, you're just listening to people agreeing with you. 100%. I really, really agree with this point. I always say that I think debate is one of the most important things that we have in society. We need to make sure that we keep that. And you either come out of a debate thinking, okay, I'm stronger in my view, or you come out of it learning something. And that's really important. You don't want to get in an echo chamber at all. Ellie, you're amazing. This man is not an easy interviewee. You're doing so well. You're definitely asking the right questions. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate that. I really appreciate the kind comments. So our next guest, I think some of you might like this guest a little bit more than the last one. We have got Gawain Towler, who I'm sure you all know. Thank you so much for joining me, Gawain. Oh, I can't hear.
He's muted.
Oh, you're muted, Gawain. I need to hear you.
Unmute yourself, Gawain.
No.
You need to unmute yourself, Gawain.
Tell him to go off and come back on again.
Maybe.
We're going to kick him off and have him rejoin.
Yeah. That's fine, that's fine. I mean, we've got a sneak peek into Gawain there, so, oh well, excellent interview. Thank you very much, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm not sure what you guys would have thought about it, just because, you know, he is someone that is naturally more left-wing, but I think in many ways he was very critical of Keir Starmer, but he is an Andy Burnham fan, but that might change quite soon. Thanks for this interview, whether we agree with him or not. Yeah, exactly, and as I said, I think it's so important that we speak to people that we politically disagree with. We can't just get in an echo chamber. Ellie is a brilliant young lady, a breath of fresh air from middle-aged men, and her intellect gives me hope for the younger generation. Thank you very much. I'm flattering me way too much, guys. But thank you for the kind comments. And yeah, I want to try and get as many kind of interesting guests as possible and people that you might not usually see. So I thought that was good. And I didn't want to be too confrontational either and, you know, jump down every single thing he said. I wanted to actually hear what he had to say. Refreshing to hear an actual discussion rather than presenters thinking they have to constantly interrupt and talk over the guests. Good job, Ellie. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to just constantly interrupt. If I think there's something, okay, he needs to be pulled up on that, then I will say something, no matter who I'm interviewing, if that's someone I disagree with or agree with. So, oh, we have got Pooch now in the studio. I mean, Gawain is clearly, I don't know what's going on with
We're
Gawain
waiting on
here.
him. At the moment, he has muted himself, so he's...
That is, I think every time I've done a Zoom call with Gawain, that's happened.
How do you think that... I'm so impressed, Ellie. Well done.
Thank you.
I'm so impressed. It's if I could say, poor Ellie came in very nervous.
Yeah.
But as you should be before you're doing anything that means something.
Yeah, exactly.
Usain Bolt would be nervous at the beginning of 100 metres, and if he wasn't, he wouldn't run 9.58 seconds.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. I thought it was very interesting. I've disagreed with Dan on many, many issues, but as you said, I think it is so important to be able to hear another point of view. I think at the moment, politics is just too divisive. There's too many people shouting at one side, shouting at the other side, and we're not getting anywhere, are we?
No, exactly.
Any takeaways? What did you take away from the interview?
Well, I think there is some things that I do agree with him on. For example, I think Reform should be more positive about their messaging, and I think, you know, that's something that I would say I'm sympathetic towards Reform. But I'm willing to criticise them and call them out when necessary, as I do for every other political party.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that it was interesting that Dan kind of defended himself against some of the accusations he's been getting of just being very anti-reform. I think there is some truth to that he has been focusing on reform much more than any other political parties. And I didn't get the chance to ask him, but I was going to point out that I think when there is scandals in reform, say one MP has done something wrong, automatically the majority of journalists and commentators think that reflects the whole entire party, yet they don't do the same with Labour or the Conservatives. So I think that I'd like to see some more consistency from Dan, but I'm very happy that he actually came in and had a discussion, because you'd be surprised, lots of people on the left don't even want to have a discussion with someone that's on the right. No. So I think it's great that he came in.
Ellie, I think
sorry to interrupt,
it's a testament to you, Ellie, so well done.
Thank you very much.
Let's hear what Gawain thinks.
Gawain is here, finally. Gawain, can I hear you? I still can't hear you, Gawain. Oh my. Oh. Has he got his mic muted?
Yeah. He's got to unmute himself on his
Gawain,
phone.
do you know how to unmute yourself? No. There's a button at the bottom. Oh my God.
Right. Paige, sit back down.
Paige is sitting back down. I really want to talk to Gawain about this interview. Come on, Gawain. Yeah, anyway, so I was just saying that I think that Dan actually having the courtesy to come in and have that discussion was really good. And I think that my respect for him has definitely gone up because he done that.
Yeah, it's also interesting from the point of view of kind of running a channel like this, that people come on the comments and say, oh, get this person on, get that person on.
Yeah.
They don't always want to come on.
Yeah,
we can't, we've got a great team, and yourself, you got Dan's booking, Charlotte gets the bookings, Scarlett will get some bookings. We're all trying hard to get people on, but sometimes the tail wags the dog a bit, I find. So if we get a guest on that people don't like, this is a numbers game after all. You know, we want to have good numbers watching. People turn off, and it's like hearing a song you don't like on the radio. You just turn off and walk away, and you might go to a different station.
Yeah.
So yes, I want us to be not to be an echo chamber, but equally I don't want to shy away from having guests on that people don't like, purely because I think people are going to get upset about it. I think we've got to hear these different opinions.
Yeah, 100%. And it's great having people on that we agree with, and I love talking to people like Gawain, for example, and I think it's fantastic.
Well,
but
we can try Gawain.
let's try again. After
Right.
Gawain.
Can you hear me?
I can go.
I've never been so happy to hear your voice, Gawain.
Well, that's a foolish thing in the first place, but okay.
So, I don't know if you managed to catch any of that interview.
I caught
Dan.
some of Dan's stuff.
Okay.
And the point you were making about there are two great things in life when you talk to people, and that is being proven right, so you feel good about yourself because you have a position and you're proven right,
Yeah.
and then being proven wrong because that way you learn. Both of these things are good. One, you feel good because hey, you were right, and two, you feel good because you've learned something. And you don't learn something from people who tell you you're right.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's why I wanted to have Dan in. And I disagree with him on a lot of things, but kind of having the chance to sit down and have a discussion with him and see what he thinks. And I do disagree with him on some things, but I've come away from that interview learning some things, but also some things I'm even stronger in my beliefs, and I think that's really important.
I think that Dan has since the spring, and I think since the second round of local elections where Reform dominated, I think since then, Dan, because you had the rise of Burnham and because you've got a likely Burnham prime ministership for the next few years, Dan, he is sometimes a bit of a court writer. He writes to please the people in power. So he was very close to Brown. He was then very close to Cameron. He saw the wind was blowing and he moved away. And he has this, in order to get access and to have conversations with those people in positions of authority, he sometimes plays the game. But he's no fool. He isn't a fool. I just think he's a little bit fixated at present.
Do you think he's right about any of the things that he's criticised Reform of?
We are a party in growth. There are going to be missteps. We are not perfect. Nobody's ever claimed to be perfect. Nigel's never claimed to be perfect. None of us are. And as we grow, there will be missteps left, right, and centre because that's just the nature of humanity. However, I think if you look at, say, the policy that came out yesterday from Generic, what we saw there was a policy that came out that had looked at second order problems, had seen, okay, this is what we want to do, and what are the problems that might arise if we do that? And there was you can see from that, a policy paper, the depth of thinking and seriousness that I don't think you see much elsewhere. And I can see this is a party in growth and a party finding its confidence and feet when it comes to policy development. And I'm really pleased.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And I think that Reform is still in a place where they are growing. But I am going to have to ask you, because it came out this morning, obviously, Tim Montgomery having his membership being taken off him. I mean, that's a very big decision.
Suspended, I believe.
Suspended.
I believe. But I'm not privy to the conversations that took place. I'm just aware, like you are, of what I've read on Twitter or X.
Okay.
And so, yes, people. Sometimes somebody who is perceived to be a spokesman for the party deliberately, and he's perceived to be such, deliberately attacking people within the party. I think you've got to ask questions. I'm a friend of Tim, but you've got to say, hold on, whether you are an employee of the party, which he is not, or an MP, which he is not, or somebody on the board like I am, which he is not. He is just an ordinary member. But he is perceived, because he has a media pulpit that he has built himself over the years, his words carry more weight than Fred and the dog and duck, who's a party member.
Yeah,
and there is a level of responsibility there.
Okay, yeah, I think that is true, and I don't know if you have had a chance to watch a Spectator interview that he did.
I was on the train this morning, so I had to turn it off. People were glaring at me in a funny way.
But he was being, very critical of the party and certain decisions being made, especially in regard to Zia Yusuf. Where do you draw the line in terms of being critical and giving feedback to the party to actually kind of bringing the party into conflict, really, and causing issues for the party?
I think that this is we are not drones. People are not drones. They do things in different ways. Zia is very popular amongst the membership because he doesn't come across like an ordinary politician. He's very popular amongst the membership because he will say it as he sees it, and rather than sit in a seminar and talk through a committee. But that's exactly why he's popular. But it does ruffle feathers. We have a political system that used to everybody being terribly clubbable with each other, and Zia will not forgive people for what he perceives as the failures of the last 14 years. I'm very different from Zia. I'm a much more emollient, chummy sort of chap. I will make my criticisms, but I don't go with my sort of machine gun at my hip. But you've got to remember, one of the reasons why reform exists is because we are all fed up to the back teeth of the political establishment that has failed us so badly over the years. And Zia exemplifies that anger, but he does it in an ordinary way rather than a way that traditionally politics has been done in this country. And so I don't think anybody thinks that what Zia is doing is not honest to himself. He's not making stuff up to look good. He's saying what he believes. And that is extremely unusual in British politics. And it cuts through very. And basically, if you go to a pub, and funnily enough, I do go to quite a lot of pubs, all over the country, no less. And, and you talk to people, what he speaks is the language of the pub, not of the seminar room.
Yeah,
and this is deeply unusual in British politics.
Yeah, it is true. And let's talk about the Clacton by-election, actually, because obviously great result from Reform, but also quite unexpected. What happens now? Because, I mean, we're kind of in this middle ground now where another by-election could have to be called in a couple of months. What happens here?
Well, I think my contention on this is very simple. The reason you have a recall by-election is that the committee, which is a bunch of your political opponents and a bunch of people wearing lanyards, will decide on whether Mr. Farage has to be punished by the Parliament. That punishment could be a suspension of up to however long they wish. But a suspension of 10 days triggers automatically a recall petition in which you need, I think he's got 79,000, so 7,900, 10% of the constituency needs to sign a petition recalling a by-election. My feeling is if they were to do so, if they were to give him 10 days or more, that a recall petition would be seen as the establishment ganging up on Farage. According to the Survation poll done just before, about a week before the election, 90% of the people of Clacton are aware that Mr. Farage received a gift of £5 million and that he did not report it to the parliamentary authorities. Now, he believes that and I believe him, that he didn't need to. However, I do not see the particular committee in question not taking the opportunity to smack him because they don't like him very much. But given that he's already had a by-election, on the facts he received £5 million, he did not report it. That question has already been asked the people of Clacton. And if they were to ask it again, I think you'd see a smaller turnout, but a bigger percentage vote for Nigel. Because people will just see it as what it is, which is the establishment don't like him very much. Of course, the real banter possibility is if they do that, and that BBC comedian stands again as Mr. Binface, he'd probably come second. You can see the Lib Dem bar graphs now, can't you? The only Binface can beat Farage here. And the Tories and Labour and Restore and the Lib Dems and the Greens have all said that they would stand in a follow-up by-election. He'd beat them. And so you'd have Farage way in the lead with a bigger percentage than he's ever had before, followed by Binface, and followed under 5% by Labour, Tories, Greens, Lib Dem, Restore. It would be really rather entertaining. I don't want there to be another by-election. I don't think the people of Tendring need to pay for another one. The question has been asked. The people of Clacton are well aware of what Nigel has done.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's moot. But if they do, it could be the most catastrophically embarrassing by-election for the legacy and establishment parties that there's ever been.
Mm. And how would you respond to Dan's claim that Nigel obviously used to be very positive and now he's saying that he's become quite angry, quite tetchy, and Reform have become the nasty party?
I think it's all very well to complain about somebody having a sense of humour failure. But once you've received the amount of ordure that has been poured on Nigel from the press and the media, and the same question repeated time and again in a press conference, he answers the question, and the next journalist asks the same question. It's got, for goodness sake, I've just answered that. Oh, but we want it for our camera. Ugh, yeah, whatever. Yes, Nigel is very good at self-deprecating humour. He is good, and actually, I think what I've seen in the last couple of weeks is Nigel back on form. I think that he was a little bit tetchy in the past, but he loves campaigning. And one of the reasons he loves campaigning is he has the opportunity to talk to people and listen to people. And that's what he's really good at. Being locked in a tower block in the north, in Pimlico, isn't his best place. What he's good at is people. And doing the by-election, being out, knocking on the doors, talking to people, left, right, and centre, is his happy place. And you can see the last two press conferences he did last week, when he was responding to the Rupert Lowe sort of strange billet doux. His response to that was Nigel on really good form. He was smiling. He was enjoying it. You can see he's enjoying his politics again. And maybe he hasn't enjoyed it so much over the last few months because of this constant stream of grief. And so it ill behoves somebody to complain about somebody else being a bit annoyed. You're allowed to be a bit annoyed in life. And fair enough. But it did feel, as I say, the last couple of weeks, as he really got into the Claxton by-election, you could see him really enjoying himself. And that's great.
Yeah,
Politics is really serious, but if you don't enjoy it, it's very hard to do.
I definitely think that's true. I mean, being in Clacton, you could see that. I think everyone knows that Nigel is happiest when he's campaigning. And you saw, I actually didn't end up going to Farage Fest, but I saw some videos from it, and it looked like you didn't go. Gawain, what's happened?
I was there in the morning, but I had to go out to work to do in Blackpool the next morning, so I had to go. So I missed it. But I did see the film from the Ferris wheel, and I looked down at this field and all the bell tents, and I thought it looks like the encampment before the Battle of Agincourt.
I mean, it's something only Reform could put on, I think, but it sounds like everyone had a pretty good time.
From all accounts of those people I know who went, they had a thoroughly good time. No, it's great and good for them. And again, you saw people saying that we're humorless. Gosh, some of the commentators, how dare they enjoy themselves?
Yeah, I agree with that.
What's all that about? The whole point, and what I make very clear when I go around the country, is if you don't, yes, we think we are trying to save the nation. Yes, we think we're at the last chance saloon for our country, our culture, our history, our law, and everything about us. But if you don't enjoy it, if you don't actually like the people you're working with, if you don't have fun, you're not going to be able to do it. Only if you're enjoying it and enjoying what you're doing will you be prepared to walk in a November evening knocking on doors in the rain. To do the work requires you to actually not just think it's serious and important, but actually it's enjoyable, have fun.
Yeah. Gawain, thank you very much for joining me despite all of the technical issues.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. In the end, it's off my phone, not my laptop.
It's okay. You got there in the end. Thank you very much, Gawain.
A great pleasure.
That was Gawain Towler there. In response to Dan Hodges, I would say it was quite an equal show so far in terms of political views. I'm sure all of you might have preferred Gawain a little bit more there. Do we have Jack? Is he ready? Or
we do.
Oh, we've got Jack. Amazing. Jack, hi. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing all right. How's yourself?
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'm glad that you could come on the show to talk about Jason Arde, and you went to his, was it a memorial service kind of thing in Trafalgar Square?
Yes, it was a memorial protest, really. I mean, it was clearly organised by Stand Up to Racism. Wayman Bennett, who is one of the chief guys of SUTR, was sort of emceeing the protest there. They had all the previous, stand up to racism placards, which said, rest in power, Professor Arday. So it was just like any other protest that they would organize in Trafalgar Square at the same spot, kind of at the same time, but just this one was a little more somber than usual. But other than that, all the same characters, all the same creatures you usually see at a big leftist protest. Yeah.
I mean, what was it? What were the speeches like there? Were they kind of honouring Jason Arday and talking about how great he is? What was the mood there? I mean, it's a really awkward situation to talk about because it is really, really tragic, and I'm very sorry for all of his family and friends that are now having to deal with this. And it's tragic what's happened, but have the press kind of done something wrong here? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't think they have, and I'll just answer the first question there first. The mood was primarily, there was a little bit of mourning him, but primarily it was an angry sort of striking out, certainly from the speeches, of blaming the mainstream media. I think there was another placard that said, the racism of the mainstream media is what killed Jason Arday. Diane Abbott was there, and a few other people were there. They went off against Nathan Kofnas, who was the former Cambridge professor who originally launched the Substack, calling him an ethno-supremacist. Again, there was the Black Power fists were being raised at a certain point during the memorial bit. There was also somebody did a cover of Coldplay's "Fix You," which I've never actually seen at a leftist protest before. But just to answer the second part of the question, no, like the media have absolutely nothing to answer for. All they did is report rightfully on a man who clearly made just so many things up and shouldn't have been in the position where he was. I see the argument that, if it was a plagiarist, there's been other instances of plagiarism that nobody ever hears about. Well, sometimes, you do get this in the news, and the previous reports, I have seen that there were news reports on former professors, plagiarizing their stuff. But people have to remember this is not a story just about plagiarism. It's about a story of a man who invented literally fantastical claims after being found out to be a plagiarist. And that's why it became the story that it did. It was a completely reasonable story that everybody had a legitimate right to be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, would you say that it's actually Jason Arday's fault? I mean, obviously it is in many reasons. All of the things he done, I mean, the lies are just absolutely ridiculous. But isn't it more the institution's fault that he could get away with this so easily?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put the fault specifically on the institutions. I would say it's Jason Arday himself that has the blame, on this blowing up, because it was him that told all of these lies. It was him that concocted the fact that he ran 30 marathons in 35 days with a broken leg, that he was on a TV show before he was even born, that he couldn't speak until he was 11, but classroom friends said that he could. So it's not Cambridge that concocted all of this just ridiculous fantasy around him, but they do share some of the blame in that without the DEI sort of agenda that is being pushed through our institutions, that is not only platforming people who shouldn't be there, but people who are total fantasists, and then being pushed to the forefront of things, we wouldn't be in the situation to begin with. So these people have always existed, these people who just want to be the center of attention and when we'll make everything up. But we haven't always had institutions that will throw them to the forefront and say, wow, look at how wonderful these people are, this person is.
And was there a large crowd there as well? Who were the kind of people that were in the crowd? And I mean, you said that they were saying how this is kind of racism that's led to this. Is this kind of another, obviously less of a large version of Black Lives Matter kind of thing?
Yeah, it is the same thing. I will say there were probably around 1,000 to 1,500 people there. So from what I've seen at previous SUTR Trafalgar Square protests, this was probably a little bit bigger than I've seen them before, but pretty much average for what they could get out for that location in central London. So not something huge. I did find it quite funny that Nathan Kofnas said on his Substack that 15,000 people were there and described it as an anti-Kofnas hate rally, which is so that's not exactly accurate. But yeah, 1,000 to 1,500 people, I would say, and it definitely is. Really, it is a smaller BLM in a way. Obviously, it's not comparable to George Floyd or Mike Brown or people who died in incidents with the police. But it comes back to the same thing again, which is, a black person has done something wrong, which is, lying, concocting stuff, and they've then tragically died. And then the blame goes on the so-called racism of the institutions, be that the police or the education system, or in this case, the press, and putting the blame on everyone but the individual themselves for creating that situation, and finding racism where racism did not exist. If I'm sorry, but if Jason Arday was a white guy who'd made up the same things and Cambridge had promoted him as this, incredible, amazing, early 20-something professor that's one of the greatest we've ever had and threw him all around, and he was white, like the press would have had the exact same reaction to him. They didn't go for him because he was black. They went for him because he just made up insane stuff.
And let's have a look at some of the videos that you took yesterday. Have you got them ready?
I'm here now at the memorial protests for Professor Jason Arday, which is happening right now in Trafalgar Square, seemingly organised by Stand Up to Racism. All of their usual lot are here. They have signs which say "Rest in Power" to Professor Jason Arday. There are other signs which I've seen which says that racism within mainstream media kills. Funny enough, the only other media I've seen here is actually the BBC. Daniel Sanford, the home correspondent, is just round to my side at the moment, so I'm not sure whether media is going to have a friendly time here. I suspect not. There have been people speaking. Diane Abbott just spoke. Lots of people again here blaming the media specifically for supposedly hounding Arday to his death. Quite a somber atmosphere here. There was attacks on Nathan Kofnas earlier, calling him an ethno-supremacist. Obviously, the original former Cambridge professor who brought up the original Substack about Arday just a few weeks ago. Obviously, all this has happened within quite a small amount of time. Again, quite a somber mood here. Lots of people with flowers, roses, white roses, and other flowers here. People in the memorial, but yeah, it's pretty quiet. Again, does seem to be a hostile crowd. Again, lots of people here to pay their respects to Arday, despite obviously all of the things that he spun, obviously blaming the entire thing not on anything that he said, only the media criticising what he'd done.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting clip there, Jack, and I think you can even tell from there, it's quite a somber mood, really. It just seemed very eerie there.
Yeah, I mean, there were people crying there as well. I did see, which again you don't usually see at these Stand Up to Racism organised events. And I think there was one guy that came across that I think he just tried to get through the crowd and couldn't, and he was like trying to rush somewhere, and he was like, "Why are you doing this now? You get out the way," sort of thing. And a bunch of people just started shouting at him like, "Be respectful. This is, we're here to pay our respects. Piss off," sort of language. Probably, and also a little bit stronger than that. Probably can't say on air. So yeah, no, it was definitely odd. But yeah, it was just like the usual process I've been to. But
yeah,
there was not that many people in the press there. As I said, I only saw Daniel Sanderson of the BBC and someone from Al Jazeera as well.
Okay.
Not that many coverage,
Yeah, that is very interesting. There wasn't really that much coverage there. I guess it wasn't. I didn't even know this was happening, so I guess it wasn't well pushed on social media. But Jack, thank you very much for joining me and great reporting.
Thank you.
Amazing, and that's a wrap. That is the whole show done now. Only 8 minutes overrun. I thought we were going to go a bit further than that, but I've been quite good at my timekeeping, which is quite rare. Well done, Ellie. Another great show. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate that. Brilliant show again, Ellie. You are a natural for this. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate that. And if any of I do not agree with what Dan says at all, but I'm glad he's on, otherwise this just becomes an echo chamber. Yeah, exactly, this is my point, 100%. And if any of you want to follow me on any other social media platforms, my ex, Ellie Hodges, Instagram Ellie Hodges, every platform, just search up Ellie Hodges and I should be there. So thank you all very much for watching today. I will be back on Thursday. I'm not here tomorrow, unfortunately, but see you all on Thursday, and thank you all very, very much for joining me. See you later, bye.